have to find
We are
another,
live.
okay, this is Senate Finance. We are late. We're starting on H 657, but I was briefing the committee. We are going to have to find another revenue source. If, in fact, we are cutting the Act 250 fees, but the number of applicants. Plus, we're upping the board, making it a professional full-time board in this bill, I believe, and we'll know when we go through it. So we are gonna have to work on finding an ongoing funding source, which the property can't transfer tax won't be.
Why, we decided to jettison that, or?
My suggestion has been, I think we can only hit the upper end of the property tax like once before we do start causing some moving. I would rather do a enhanced property tax and raise some money for the ed fund because 2 cents is pretty paltry this year. And see where we can go with it. I don't think we can do both. But that,
Trying to make the houses.
I don't know.
Well,
I'm just gonna do an approach for a 5-minute bit.
Okay,
Do you want me to close the door?
yes, so we're started. So the first thing we're gonna do today is get out, I hope, H 657, because I'm sure, are gonna go to conference on that one. So Maria, well, no, we have John first, right? Nope, we have Maria. All right. John, I apologize. We've canceled you for several days. We will get there.
Good afternoon, Maria Royal. Good, that's good. Legislative Council. So the document's posted under my name. I'm gonna also share my screen. And there are some hard copies going around for those of you who prefer to work on the hard copy.
Anyone need one? Yes, please.
You got, okay. Everyone has it. And it is posted on the website. So we are still doing this. We are leaving section 1 alone. We went over the other days. Maria.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, yes, and so this is draft 1.3. And you left the universal service fund section alone as passed the House. What we reviewed on Tuesday was a draft committee report. And in that you saw a proposal of study and report on communications property tax. That has been left the same since Tuesday, so the changes actually start on page 4, and it's with respect to the right-of-way study and report back. And so I used track changes, so you see pretty clearly where those changes are, and we'll go through them now. So in subsection A, just rewrote that a little bit. That the study is for the purpose of developing a fee structure applicable to communication property in the right of way. There's still a requirement that there's a cost benefit analysis with respect to that structure to determine how it would be implemented in Vermont or what those costs and benefits might be. So then subsection B at the bottom of page 4, this is with respect to the inventory or the collection of the data. So we'll just go through that, and it specifies that on or before July 1st, 2025, the Secretary of Transportation, in consultation with the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, the CGI, which is housed within the Agency of Digital Services, and you're gonna hear from the director, John Adams, momentarily. Shall develop a right-of-way GIS database indicating the location and ownership of communications property, and you also wanted to be clear that you're also want to include electric and natural gas infrastructure in the right of way. And so I think you also wanted some greater detail about this, just the database portion of it. So on page 5, subdivision 2, in a form and manner determined by the secretary, each communications, electric, and natural gas company that has infrastructure in the right of way shall submit an inventory of its infrastructure in GIS format to the Agency of Transportation for inclusion in the right of way GIS database. The secretary may require such companies to submit additional information to ensure the database is comprehensive and sufficiently detailed to support various regulatory purposes, including property taxation, emergency management, and broadband mapping. So just general kind of look at other entities that may also be looking at this.
This will tell the munis and the others that we, at least the Department of Public Service. That's
Any
required
information.
So this would say everybody with poles and wires has.
Well, that's the idea, that everyone has infrastructure in this particular database. Transportation would provide the right of way later. Right, but it just recognizes that there are other uses, perhaps regulatory uses of this information. And so along those lines, subdivision 3, the secretary may review and incorporate into its right-of-way GIS database and relevant data collected and maintained by Public Safety Communication Task Force, the Department of Public Service, the Department of Taxes, and any other state or municipal entity deemed appropriate by the secretary. So you asked about the Public Safety Communications Task Force. They are doing their own inventory. It's mostly to determine where the communications dead zones are for public safety purposes, for the land mobile radios and cellular coverage. So that's mostly wireless, but that is data that's going to be collected, and their inventory is due September of this year. As you know, Department of Public Service, they do broadband mapping, have other data. Department of Taxes, they collect inventories from the electric companies already for tax purposes. So again, just recognizing there is data out there and to the extent it can be drawn upon or incorporated. And then subdivision 4 specifies that the data collected pursuant to this subsection shall be exempt from public inspection and copying. So, right, under this proposal, it's all confidential. You'll see in subsection C, or actually subsection D, with findings and recommendations, one of the recommendations you asked of the secretary in doing this study is to come up with parameters for what information could be available to the general public or kept confidential. So you'll get some recommendations and then you can decide at a future legislative enactment if you want to ensure that there's some public access. So just a few technical changes, but other than that, just one change to the date. So the inventory is due next July, or that's supposed to be completed by then. And then the final report, instead
Chair.
of January.
I'm having trouble following what we're looking at, and
Okay,
I
I think,
be slower, but let me go through language and we don't identify the page and
Sure.
where it is.
Yeah.
Our
So,
council has been working on this. I
okay,
don't know whether it's a comprehensive thing or we're doing various
This is-
parts.
yeah, no,
this is the amendment that we went over most of it on Tuesday. That turned sections 2, we're now on section 3. And this is the data gathering of the utility poles and wires that are in the right of way.
Right.
And this is the,
Goal is to find out all of what's out there
yes,
and not to find ourselves like diverted to doing some things, subsets, and not doing the whole thing.
but this, and we're gonna find out how much we actually have now from the GIS. And it was suggested by the Department of Public Service that we require all utilities to report their polls inventory to them. The munis don't, and I thought you said that that is included in.
Well, this would be part of the right of way inventory, would include the state highway system as well as the municipal roadway system. The reporting would be by the utilities and communications providers directly to the agency of transportation. So
Okay.
no need to go through the Department of Public Service, because they're not collecting the data, all they would be doing would be
They
giving.
get it to GIS.
So it just goes to, yeah, and transportation will be working with, under this proposal, DCGI.
Okay.
And so just to clarify, Senator McDonald, the changes are all in section 9, which is on page 4 of the draft. And I've also shared my screen, so it's up on the screen behind me.
Red.
And all of the changes are in red, so the new language that
Very helpful.
okay, so again, the inventory database, the GIS database, completed by July 1st of next year, with all of the reporting of information going directly to the Agency of Transportation. And then also, we just went over collecting any available data already out there in state government. So the other substantive change, just to wrap this up, and then I can answer any questions you might have. The final report is due December 15th, 2025, so a month earlier, than that it was January 15th, 2026, but this gives you some time before the start of the session to read it and prepare any draft legislation you would like.
Yeah, we'll have to do it the first year. Because the second year is. Of the biennium is December 1st, but, okay. That works,
Okay,
all right, committee, any questions?
Just, I support the general direction of this, I really appreciate the work on this. My question is, we went back and forth, right now it's the Secretary of Transportation and they're gonna do with VCGI. But this will only collect, utilities in the road right of way, so this would not extend to communications or utilities on private land or on municipal roads.
correct. No, it does include municipal roads.
Things through field and countryside that's beyond the scope of what will be collected.
Well, for this purpose, it does specify right away, it doesn't mean, yeah. And so that's a good question, whether you would just want to have a broader database.
I think what we may do is talk to GIS and find out what they have. Because they might have all of this, so.
Second question. I'm already anticipating questions about the Public Records Act, and so
Yes.
I just is there any more softer language about to the greatest extent possible consistent with open public records laws? These records will be kept in owned by just the data that comes from private entities. I would just love some more, because this is so broad that it's really gonna put a cover over everything that's collected
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's some greater specificity on the data that comes from private entities, including the CUDs.
That you want that,
I don't want everything shut out,
Okay.
shut out from the view of the public, but it's more narrow, I would suggest.
I think we've been told that some poll data is confidential,
Right.
that. I think at this point, it might be hard to tease that out.
Just thinking of Senator Renner's comments on this before, so I'm just trying to narrow it to allow for as much visibility as possible.
Well, any meeting that it's discussed, that will be. Open.
Maybe it's as good as
But
this.
also, if we're doing this for public safety, is part of the reason to know what we're getting out and coordinating with emergency management, who's doing others. It would take a while, probably have to be GovOps, who just did a new public records law. To sort out what is proprietary business information, what is safety, security.
So there are a couple different things you could do. In the past, I've definitely drafted language that said company-specific data might not be available. So in other words, one company has an inventory of everything. You know, in other words, it might be available in an aggregated format. The other thing is if you didn't have the exemption, then the Public Records Act would apply. So already. And so the exemptions that exist under current law, if it's proprietary information, if it's security information, if it's already exempt under federal law, if it's critical, all of those exemptions would apply. So it would be then up to the owner and manager of the database to make those determinations about what should be publicly available.
Okay, so proprietary business information would be
That's already an
exemption
exemption.
existed, so then,
Right, so the general exemptions would still apply. It's just a question of how,
if we took this out,
exactly.
this says that public information doesn't apply. If we take it out,
The default, the Public Records Act would apply and all of the exemptions to disclosure would apply.
okay. Do we want,
But there's one thing. One approach is not to inventory what we think is subject to being kept private or whatever. Or to make sure we get everything inventoried, so we know what's out there.
right,
And are we preempting those somehow? Are we leaving a way in which we will fail to find out all the things that are out there?
Well, I think Senator Chittenden raised a good point about utility infrastructure that's on private land. Is that being reported? Do you want that included in the mapping? That's a question.
If we're going to make decisions and we don't know what's out there because we have extended it in this way, we have chosen not to inventory it, which is why Senator Chittenden's question is so right spot on now. What do we intend to do?
I believe the chair suggested maybe GI doesn't have an answer to some of that.
yeah, I think,
In the event that
I
we do or
thought,
don't, what are the options that we would call for when we learn what GIS does have or doesn't have?
the purpose of this bill as it came to us was to inventory what's in the right of way. I thought we had broadened that, because we thought we should know where the poles and wires are, and it's been suggested that we do know that. Or that we do know a large part of that, and it's been suggested maybe we even know which ones are in the right of way. This question is, what part of that information, this just says any information transportation collects is exempt from public record, am I right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that is correct. And you obviously don't need to have that broad exemption. And in fact, it contemplates that there will be a report back. It won't be until December 2025 about what the parameters for disclosure should be. And at that time you can. So it was in the meantime to ensure
they
that
don't-
companies are, feel like their information is not.
They don't have to worry about. As we go to court to argue about what is proprietary information, so it's only exempt until we get the report back.
Well, you would have to remove the exemption, just be clear, but the point is you'll hear at that time what the recommendations are about. So it's really a policy choice. You could,
So I'm worried that we are gonna say, put the people that we direct to inventory the stuff that's out there. If they would do that and say, well, we didn't include that because we believe it's exempt or we were told. to."
no, separate issue. That's a separate issue. The exemption is not from reporting for regulatory purposes, all the information must be reported. It's whether it's publicly available
Right.
and in what
Do
format.
you, so are you assuring us that this language will make sure everything that's out there having to do with telecom stuff will be reported and be collected, and then we'll fight about what's exempt or not exempt from that report at a later date?
Yeah, so let's just turn to page 5. Subdivision 2. Very top of the page. So it specifies in a form and manner determined by the secretary. And again, this originally is for purposes of ultimately collecting a right-of-way fee. That's why the emphasis has been on where's the right-of-way, what's in the right-of-way, so that they can, anyway. Each communications, electric, and natural gas company that has infrastructure in the right-of-way, state and municipal as defined here, shall submit an inventory of its infrastructure in GIS format to the Agency of Transportation for inclusion in the right-of-way GIS database. And just one more, I'll just finish this sentence here, or this subdivision. The secretary may require such companies to submit additional information to ensure the database is comprehensive and sufficiently detailed to support various regulatory purposes, including property taxation, emergency management, and broadband mapping. So those are other examples.
It gives a feeling of assurance there.
Okay.
It's gonna widen that.
At least of the technology we know about now, but by the time,
Senator Wright, ready for your appropriations. Go.
okay.
Last question, last question.
Yeah.
This very exact section, if you feel that it would be traditional to have by date certain or by leaving it open, is it just gonna by default gonna fall within the deadline that the secretary has to produce it?
By default, it would fall within the by the secretary, but if you wanted to be, you can certainly have a date certain. I mean, the inventory is to be done by next July 2025.
Okay. Then
That
that's,
applies.
That would, yeah, that would apply to this, yes, because they need this data in order to do this,
then that's
develop the
6
data.
months longer than the original bill, but. Still, well, I think what we might do now is go to GIS, find out what we have, what their privacy policies are. And what we may need to find. So we may spend a long time talking about getting stuff we already have somewhere. Okay. Senator McCoy.
Yeah, are we looking just at state-owned land, or are we looking at the private land as well?
We are mapping every pole and wire in the state.
Every home, okay.
Yes, because if it's on private land, it should have
As
a.
part of the system.
Well, it's part of the system, and at some point, they got a right way to go through my backyard. It's not a license to pay, but electricity and telephone have been going through private property for years. Or state property, if it's in front of the house, it's probably in the town line.
And does this give us the information we want, presuming we want, regarding, who owes rent?
What this is giving us is hopefully information on how many poles are in the public right of way. It does not have any rent, fee, or tax attached to it at this point. Part of it is, we're gonna do a cost benefit. If we find out we've only got 100 poles, how much money are we going to get by charging them rent? Is it worth it? I mean, right now, we don't know how many poles we've got. And we don't have a purpose that the money is dedicated to. It's just been a matter of principle. 17 years ago, some of us told the department to either charge rent or they had an out, which is the public good that was being contributed by having these poles in the right of way. Meaning you've got your cable lines and electric lines that are greater than the benefit of collecting a fee. So they have made that determination every year for 17 years, and they have not charged a fee, which has caused a very, I don't know if it's irate, but definitely pointed report from the auditor, and it's caused some angst here. And so this, I've heard in this committee, who sets tax policy? And so this bill is looking at that. And I think what I've heard, run it by you a couple times, is first we're gonna find out what's there. And then we should decide if this is a fee and what service they're paying for. Is this a tax? Do we wanna do it at all? And what do we wanna do with the money? We're kind of kicking that can down the road. Because if we've got 1 million poles in the public right of way, which is probably not likely, we could do a $2 fee and make a lot of money, or we could. But we might have to do, if we've only got 100 poles, we'd have to do $200 fee, if that's not what we want to do. So we're not making any decision now, we're just trying to find out what's there.
I think I'm trying to make a judgment without actually sitting and reading the bill in the middle of a meeting. But are we, when will we have that information?
So the data collection and the creation of the GIS database, that should be completed by next July 2025.
A year,
About a year. And then in December of that year, you'll get a report back from the Secretary of Transportation about a fee structure that would apply a right-of-way fee. And it can have, there are a number of things to take into consideration. Population density, construction cost, whether there should be waivers or exemptions for certain entities, because they provide a public benefit, all the things that you kind of discuss in our
in
rural areas.
Or anything else that no one's thought of yet.
Yes, that's right.
And-
In rural areas,
another-
you've gotta have a lot more poles to get to one house. If you're in downtown Burlington, you could probably get 2,000 houses on that same mileage. So the bill as it came to us divided it. We're kicking that can back to the Secretary of Transportation to say, first, find out what we've got, then make a recommendation. Right now, the money would go to the transportation fund as to what you would recommend we collect and how you recommend we would go about it. So a year, or less than a year from now, we could take that up.
No,
No?
it's December
Oh, that's right.
2025.
It's another year.
Yeah. So it's,
So
those would
2
be
years from now.
recommendations.
About this time, we could take it up. Okay,
So.
I'll put you on after I get through GIS. Okay. Yes,
We're right the whole
yeah,
and one of the things about getting homework back is we get people who say, students that say, I thought you meant, or you didn't realize, and I'm feeling more and more confident that you have directed successfully our
I hope.
rapper to, there's no reason that there be no reasons that commissioners or whatever come in and say, oh, I didn't think that was supposed to be included, or.
We have not left out that the dog ate the report. That is still final, that the dog would chew it up, and we might have to wait.
But that's.
Okay, but I think we've covered reasonable bases. I am confident that the people in AOT are adults and not adolescents whose dogs eat homework. And I think, if we could clear it up as to what we want. I cannot preclude us from changing our mind before we vote on this, but for now, I think it's clear. Okay, let's let Maria find a comfortable seat. Does anybody know whose Yeti got left there?
Nope,
I'll put it lost and found. And we've got a chair. Okay. Okay, John, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, come on up. You've heard where we are in the midst of this argument. Come on up. I think we're hoping you'll tell us it's all been forgotten, you already know everything.
Let me just grab my water here. John Adams, Director, Vermont Center for Geographic Information, part of the Agency of Digital Services. I did send along a slide deck.
Okay,
Let's see.
did John share? Okay, oh yeah, we've got John there, okay.
Am I sharing? Right. I thought I'd start with just a quick overview, a little bit of what we do. So here's our purpose that was established in back in 1988, back 200. Our stakeholders really go beyond just state government or other governmental partners, but we view that as including the private sector and the public, academia, municipalities. And our responsibilities in chapter 10, we sort of boil down into these three buckets. One is to build some foundational data sets, what we call our spatial data infrastructure. I'll describe a little bit of what that is. Lead or coordinate the use of our geographic information system in the state, and then empower data visualization and access. Going back to 1992, we were looking at our annual report. We had 108 customers that would fill out mail order forms, and we would mail them out floppy disks in our entire database. It was 17 megabytes in size. Today we have far more than that. These numbers are actually out of date here, but from a few years ago, we were seeing 80,000 users a year hit our sites directly. If you count our applications now, that's well over probably 500,000. And in terms of our server requests, we see about 500 million map requests a year. So it's now become essentially a basic government service that people expect. We no longer mail out floppy disks. We have what we call a federated data model. So we host an open data portal, and we try to connect directly to the different data sources and make those available. So people aren't sending us data, and we want to make sure your people are getting access to fresh map data. So we hook up directly to their servers if possible and make that available in one place. And people will sort of stream that map data over the internet and web applications in a similar way as a movie over Netflix, or whereas you may have previously gone to the video store to rent it, now you stream it online. The same is true for a lot of map data these days. In terms of spatial data infrastructure, there are these framework themes that are set out by the Federal Geographic Data Committee. These are sort of the key data themes that everyone sort of requires to build out the rest of our map data. We're the stewards of these top five, so our ortho imagery, our elevation data, our governmental units, so administrative boundaries, parcel data and land cover, and then E911 manages our E911 addresses, transportation manages our transportation data, and ANR is the steward for our hydrography data. Very quickly, our imagery program, we try to collect leaf off no snow, no clouds, which is in Vermont today. And I was just looking at our flight lines, and we have a plane that should be probably flying over here within the next half hour, so if we all want to get outside with our chalks, or, you know, get all the senators to do a big peace sign laying down on the front lawn, now would be the time. Parcel data, by far the most popular, most requested data in the state. This joins together our property lines with our grand list, so you can visualize property ownership. And then finally LiDAR data, which uses a sensor which sends a pulse down, a laser that will come back with a very accurate measurement of the Earth. We get a point cloud from that. This is, you can see National Life in the foreground here with the State House in the background. This is just what a raw point cloud looks like. And then we process those into derivatives. So we rip all the trees and buildings off the face of the Earth to create a model of sort of the face of Vermont, which becomes useful for modeling things like where water goes. Combine those things together, we can derive things like land cover, useful for a lot of different purposes.
Oh.
Wanted to take a minute here to acknowledge Jarlath O'Neill Dunn from the Spatial Analysis Lab. Thanks to Jarlath and his team, we are really, Vermont has become leaders in some of this high resolution land cover data. The Spatial Analysis Lab does a lot of the processing for us. Only here. Fortunately, Jarlath died tragically earlier this year. To acknowledge Jarlath and everything he's done for us. Outside of that, we do pick on various as needed, try to help out on projects like with the July flooding that took place, coordinating again with AOP and the University of Vermont in making some of that imagery that was captured available as quickly as possible and helping modeling that out with flood data. But that's a little, high level of what we do. I'm happy to talk a little bit about the right of way of pole mapping. I was only made aware of this a couple days ago, haven't really followed, but
Been told by different people that you have information on where the poles and wires, some, most, all of them are, and that you also have either center line mapping. Some of this goes back to reports that were done in the 80s. And I guess before we send AOT and all the utilities out we're assuming they may have to do some measuring from the center line to where the pole is to make determinations, unless you can do that for them. I think we want to know what kind of information do we already have we don't need to recollect.
sure, I can share with you what we have or what's been shared in our geodata portal. In terms of right of way, AOP does maintain a separate sort of a right of way, more detailed right of way line, and we do have, they publish the center line data
Okay,
in the geodata portal, so center line data is available. We also in a lot of our parcel data have some of the right of way map. It's very inconsistent across municipalities and fairly.
so there's gonna have to be a lot of groundwork done.
If you want an accurate right of way, most definitely, I just grabbed a couple of towns and filtered for, right of way in terms of the parcels. You can see on the right, those towns surrounding Johnson haven't mapped them at all or classified them at all. Oftentimes in terms of tax parcel data, you aren't taxing the right of way, so they're pretty low priority where you're including in your tax maps. So some towns have not bothered to include those.
We know the state is going to start appraising the poles and wires. So. And if the towns. Yeah, okay, and I think around most of the towns, granted, it appraised the area, they can take them from QVR.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so.
I think my what I guess what I may be trying to communicate here is at least given what we have in the parcel data right now, it would be very hard to determine
Yeah,
where a right of way is, and even
So-
where we do know, this is not survey level data. So it is not precise.
what I'm looking at is Johnson
On the right,
on
you
the
have,
right.
Mhm.
What's on the left?
that is Montpelier.
I thought that looked like Montpelier. And the yellow is the river,
The yellow is
Yes.
the right of way.
is the right of,
Little big yellow.
the,
Yellow.
the river is a darker black. So there's a huge right of way that looks like it's most of the National Life property. 89, oh, that's 89. Okay. All right, that's making more sense. I can find my house. Okay, so that is a state right of way. And then it runs out along. We don't have a state right of way on 12? Trying to figure out which, I think it's the furthest to the left without counts. All right. Senator Chin.
So I think I heard you say not all right of ways are mapped, but are all state right of ways mapped and just not all municipal right of ways?
I would think the AOTs, and I probably shouldn't speak for them, but I would guess theirs is fairly well mapped or more consistent and accurate than anything we have in municipalities that follow up.
So I think you went forward a slide, and I guess you're gonna probably talk about it, but if you read this language, do you know if utilities, telecommunications, do they already have where their things are in a format that your system can consume and then maintain privately so that it would not be publicly available? But the state of government, state of Vermont would have access to if we were to consider future assessments, if we got our right of ways under wraps?
So I'll share what I know. There are maybe two separate questions there. The first sort of being, what utility data we have. If you follow this link, it will take you to a telecommunications and connectivity page that is on our central geodata portal that has been curated by the Public Service Department. A lot of this is, in terms of the utility data, comes from three utilities that have contributed data.
GMP, Weck and Beck.
Correct, GMP, Wackenbeck. We did, several years ago, there was a request to adopt a utility pole data standard so that different utilities that wanted to or were contributing to the geodata portal, if they did so in the same format, that would be helpful.
Okay, I think, because Department of Public Service said that if we directed them to collect or directed utilities to report, that we would pick up, right now we've got the big three, but that we could pick up Northfield Electric, Thompson, Franklin, the smaller munis, and that we would then have a more complete map of where the poles were. And we have to make sure it's submitted in a form that you will work with your system. Okay, and I'm gonna assume Marina's done that, but
Well, as it says, it doesn't go through the Department of Public Service, it's just the companies report directly to the transportation in a GIS format to be
Okay.
incorporated. However, the engineers and experts, whatever's consistent with the design.
tell us what we need to put in there and we'll put it in there.
It's
So-
broad enough that it.
So I guess just a few things I would highlight. In terms of that standard that was passed, only one of the data sets that we have meets that standard. One of those sort of has us in, or indicates what the accuracy of that data is. So of the best data we have right now, that accuracy for all of the points that have been submitted is indicated to be within a 10 meters, so 30 meters.
Okay.
That presents some challenges. given that our right of way data is not precise to start with, a lot of this infrastructure is along the edges. And so just out of curiosity, I took a screenshot of the neighborhood just to the northwest of where we're sitting right here. And you can see that the infrastructure will weave in and out of the right of way. Now, it may actually be in the right of way, it may not be, it may be that the pole is not.
Okay, so what you're showing is the tax parcel excludes the edge of the lawn, which should, I'm not sure it's a 10 or 14, but it's a number of feet from the center line is the right of way. You're set back from the road, so you're putting the property line as on the other side of the right of way. The right of way is still being picked up by the road.
Right, the right of way is that area where the road is,
Right.
and those yellow dots are the matched poles.
Which are not in the right.
Some of them are, some of them are not.
Yeah, see, that's why they're gonna have to go out, I think, for the measuring tape and measure all of these things. And I think what we're hearing is you have some of the information, but not all of it. And I do have Unisil back here. Thank you. We moved Larry over here. Rather nice soft windowsill. This is starting to feel like
I'm
the
not
old
sure.
days in this committee when I needed a mirror to see who was behind me. Because I lost witnesses. Okay. So you've got this. So I assume you have for a city like Montpelier, unless we put in some new roads or something that aren't, but you have some of this information, but not, can you do this?
I would say that this could be a monumental project. There are several 100,000 poles. There are over 14,000 miles of right of way. We don't know precisely where either of those are. If accuracy is important, like we need to know if something is actually in the right of way.
Yeah.
The process for doing that would be, it would be significant. And if the purpose of this is to collect enough information to collect a fee or a tax, so there's no operational.
Well, we
Reason
can
for it.
collect it before we even decide if we're gonna collect a fee or a tax. Because it would depend on how many are out there. Transportation fund does need money. So there's probably a good chance we're gonna do something like that, but we decided in this bill, first, we're gonna find out what we have. Then we're gonna decide what we're gonna do. Okay. I'm starting. Bill calls for January 15th of 2025. We're giving them till July 2025. I'm starting to think that's a pretty short time frame. But I think we need to hear from AOT. For people who are in the room for the housing bill, we're still getting set to vote out the transmission modernization telecom bill. So it'll probably be a good 10, 15 minutes before we get to you. And, okay, committee, is there anyone from AOT in here? No. Okay, any questions for John?
So I took the liberty of texting Michelle Boomhauer, asking if she'd seen this language, and she says she has not. She's looking at it now, but there seems to be some conflict in the dates between a couple of the sections, and she'd like to make a recommendation So we know to assure her, she doesn't think 7125 is reasonable at all, so that's what we were just saying.
That's what I just said.
John Adams just touched on this. My last question, for the utility data you have, is it limited to just state right of ways, or is it really all utilities on private lands?
This isn't state.
Municipalities? It's all of.
It's whatever they've submitted to us, so for GMP back in WAC, it is. It is not limited to state right ways.
Okay,
But it's not consistent for utilities in terms of what they've submitted.
And whether or not. Right, and we can't tell you if this is in the right of way or not. This is approximately where these poles are, and it's useful for their operational purposes. But I don't think we can be able to tell you. Which ones are in or out of any right of way.
it's the AOTs, they're gonna have to take. Measuring tape and go out and measure, because it is an inch. And none of us have decided what you do with one that's half in or a quarter in. Okay. Without AOT talking to us, I think, can you think of where there might be some date inconsistencies other than maybe we'll move that from 25 to 26? I thought they
Sure,
told
because
us
it's only
25.
1 month before 2026, right? So the inventory is done July 2025, and then the report back on the fee recommended fee structure is December following that.
That might,
Not sure, maybe there was, I don't know.
okay. This is gonna go to conference, absolutely guaranteed. You could try moving that out to 26. And then if they want something else, and
You anticipated my question.
I anticipated you
Yes.
question, oh,
You did.
I'm getting in mind. So if we do it to 26, if there's any other inconsistency, we could fix it in conference. If it's, they want another 6 months to do the report, that can be done. But I think,
So moving this forward, you want to move this amendment with 2026 change?
yeah, Senator Gray sent me a note asking me if I would like an amendment, but my amendment maker is across the,
I'm gonna try it.
go ahead.
Would be draft one point.
Wait, I've got Senator,
The inventory serves a lot of purposes, and if it's to tax and make decisions about that, and if you want to postpone, that doesn't worry me. What worries me is when we postpone and it interferes with the 202C, which is the telecom stuff, and making connections and being able to back the system up for emergency management. That's the stuff that has to be done for safety and for,
right,
and to me, there are communications goals. And so
we've
to
got,
just put it off for another year means those goals languish.
okay.
So
Right now, what we're asking AOT to do is to report what's in the right of way. The extra year is, looking at this, they're gonna have to go out and measure from the center line to the pole to see if it's within the right of way. We are not that accurate in the data. We hope when we finish, we will be more accurate. We have the information for the big 3 utilities. All right, so that's the majority of the poles and wires. I'm quite sure that Franklin Telephone knows where all their poles and wires are, but we don't because we haven't told them to report it. So this is going to get that information, and we will have emergency management is doing the redundancy backup. Where are the dark holes where you don't have redundancy in the 911? So that's in process. This, I mean, we can decide that we don't agree with the people 17 years ago, and we don't care what's in the right of way, and we are, we're getting the right to tax it. But there's two set, we know a lot more about where the poles and wires are than we do about which of those poles and wires is or crossing over it or under the because you gotta dig up roads. So I don't, I don't wanna give them not enough time. And we end up getting inaccurate information because they guesstimate on a couple holes. Or a bunch of holes. Right? I think that's okay. Okay. Have you got a voting sheet? That's that.
I assume you dropped 1.4 with a timestamp about now.
That's this one here.
It's gonna be this 1.4 with a timestamp of 2:22 p.m. I would move that the Committee of Finance amend the bill with draft number 1.4, timestamp of 2:22.
Which changes that one day, that's the one change. 2 days.
Is there one date or 2 dates? 2 dates. 2 dates to move it out another year to 2026 for both the report due and the data collected. Is that good?
I can follow it later.
Sure.
Okay. Senator Chittenden has moved that we report, basically this report we've gone over, this is 1.3, 1.4 extends the time to map where the holes in the right of way are out to 1.6. And Senator Gray. Senator Chittenden made your motion. Thank you. We are moving to amend with the amendment we just went over. It is basically the amendment we went over on Tuesday. We have extended the time to report, to get the information on what poles are in the right of way out to 2026, because we found out that our GIS office doesn't have all that information. They can just print out for us. They know where most of the poles and wires are. Okay, and so we extended the recommendation on how we should, or if we should tax it out another year too. So they can have the time.
Amending is amending, I mean.
Well, no, as we speak, Maria is drafting 1.4 dated probably 2/25 today, which changes a 5 to a 6 in 2 spots.
Okay. And have you already made that motion?
Yes,
Okay.
so we are into discussion. If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. I'm seeing that as 700.
Now I would move that the Senate Finance Committee move the bill as amended favorably.
Senator
Did I
Chittenden.
get it right?
Yes,
All
we got it.
right.
Okay. Senator Chittenden moves that we report the bill favorably as amended. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. I'm calling that 700. Now, who would like to report it? Do you want to report? Yeah, well, yeah, you're in transportation. Okay.
We extended it out indefinitely for report on where the poles are in the general vicinity of the right of way.
Not indefinite.
1 year. 1 year. Okay, that was the easy part, ladies and gentlemen. We're now going on to the housing bill. So all the poles and wires people. And leave the door open for a couple minutes so we get some oxygen is a good thing. Thank you. You're a master at reading our minds. Can you train that? I mean, they teach it? Can you be able to listen to this conversation?
There. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Here's
That's one thing that
It's pretty much any one of our things. But I don't so many families.
1, 2, 3, 4, I've still got 4 rooms, so nobody can see.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and move us on. Yes, okay, I'm done. All right, committee, we have, I think it's still in here. An act relating to, what are we calling it? An act relating to community resilience and biodiversity protection through land use to which has been attached some housing proposals. This bill still has to go to the folks. I was told that I should make it voted out last night, however, at 7 o'clock, I didn't think you would be really willing to do that. Nor would I get the, in my experience, things that are done later in the evening frequently need to be redone in the light of dawn. And think of any decision that's been made around midnight that we haven't had to do. So I sent you home. But, and this is for the 2 chairs, every day this committee takes with this cuts a day out of your committee of conference time. But that's. So we've got this. We also have, where is my copy? We have amendments. And I'm going to have Kirby and John, maybe Ellen, if you could come. I think we should walk quickly through the bill, but I don't think if we're gonna have time to really, our jurisdiction is the taxes. As I told the committee last night, I have some concerns about doing property transfer tax. You just can't tax the same kinds of people twice in a year, 2 years. And I'd like to keep our ability to do a second home tax open. Because we've got the yield bill, but other than the cloud tax, which is 2 cents on what in some of our communities is still 20 cents, the average is a 15% increase in your property taxes. And I'd like to have the ability to buy that down.
So you're keeping the cloud tax on the table.
The cloud tax is on the yield bill. Did we get it today? I heard it referred to, it's down, okay,
Or.
yes. So, next week, that's what we're gonna work on. And I like, yeah. The cloud tax is on that, there are several other taxes, I believe there's also another property. The property transfer tax on the yield bill, or did it come over here on another bill? No,
Kirby Keating was the council.
that was it, Kirby.
You're asking about the
No, the cloud tax, unless it got changed on the floor, is on,
the yield bill.
The yield
And
bill.
so there's a
It's-
short-term rental reserve also.
yeah, they had a property transfer tax change. Is that on the yield or is that on another bill that hasn't come to us?
It's come to you.
Where is it? Yeah, I would, okay,
I can verify that.
all right, we didn't take it up.
It's in H 29, the house's housing bill.
Okay,
Has,
so,
yes.
all right, that did come to us. And we didn't take it up because we had a Senate version that went, I guess it was in 311, it went to natural resources and died before crossover. But much of it has been attached to this bill. Okay. If we just don't do this amendment, because I don't know how the next, if you want to go home at 5 o'clock, 2.5 hours, we're gonna be able to do it. We will try. The one group that will be most effective will be the Natural Resources Board. They were affected last year. Their losses were covered in the budget adjustment, and I had talked to the chair of appropriations They could do that again. We are going to have to find another funding source for that. Because property transfer tax is not gonna be generating enough to keep them afloat and to make them the professional in-person board. Is it? Five, okay, but 5 full-time paid salaried people. So we're gonna have to deal with that. It has been suggested, I hope you read the email about that we look at your fees. Because
It's posted on the committee.
it is posted on the committee page, and I believe my iPad is charging. We could look at those fees, which I can't ever remember adjusting. That could do some offset this year, leave any shortage to BAA with the commitment that we're gonna have to be for an ongoing source of revenue if, in fact, by the time this bill makes it all the way through, we do cut or reduce the number of active fifties.
And just for keeping everyone synced up, the house as it said 686, they had half part-time positions at the board. That Natural's version of the bills and reported for that movement to full-time position because of the volume of work we were seeing in the pipeline. So I know that economic development may end up with a different proposal. I don't know where we land on that piece. So the report as it currently exists, who's full-time positions.
Yeah,
I won't
well,
pitch for it, but it's like,
we're trying to get this out of here today, so you can have 2 full weeks to fight it out with the House. But if we are, in fact, and that seems to be where we're going, we're making the board more professional, we're giving them more work to do, but we're cutting back on the number of active 50 required permits, which means that's how they've been being funded, and they are getting that funding. So we're gonna, so who else can we tax?
and honestly, I think the fees have, as long as I've been aware, never covered the co-op.
No, I don't think
They've
they
had
have.
a move general
Yeah,
fund.
general fund,
to
yeah.
Keep topping their
Right.
banking account back up.
And this is what we did with E911, and I think if we pass that last bill, we're going to make them solvent. We're going to have to find another way to fund the board if we're cutting back on their present source of revenue, even though it isn't, and it won't be full-time, but that's one of the solutions I've come up. It's not a solution, it's a Band-Aid to get us through this year. And
Madam Chair.
yes,
I know, Ted at least, or maybe Pat, has a spreadsheet of the appropriations that are in this bill.
we've had that.
NRV is one of those affected. There's
Right.
5 million for VHCB, there's 1.5 million for regional and
Right.
municipal planning. There's the first gen home ownership. There's, I just want to make sure we understand the full
Yeah.
scope of what was intended to be funded.
There
in this.
is funding in this bill. There is also funding for these programs in the budget, so it's this.
Not all of them,
What, no, not from the like,
Not-
that NRV.
not NRB, not LAOB, the Land Access and Opportunity Board, and Gus and Polly are traveling. VHCB, it was for specific programs within VHCB that will no longer be able to be funded, including farm and refugee housing. And the first generation home ownership.
So this is a good segue for me. I did quickly throw together a chart for you comparing the underlying Senate National Report and what we have for an amendment right now,
Okay,
so we can go through and compare.
That
And
would
then
be
maybe with the help of John, we can pinpoint some appropriations
okay,
along the
wow, and we see the pictures,
It's on the
okay,
committee.
and it is on the committee page for anyone that is looking.
Madam Chair, can I ask?
Yeah.
a quick high level question? Have you been given, a fundraising target by appropriations relative to this bill or more generally?
no one from appropriations has talked to me about this amendment. But I understand they funded what they could fund with the money we raised, both the streaming tax and the fees, and they spent it. This would be additional money or money for programs they didn't fund. But it would also perhaps preclude us from being able to raise a greater source of money to help the ed fund. I mean, I'm trying to find that balance.
Can I just clarify if you're proposing to do that property tax on second homes this year?
It would not, we wouldn't be able to get the money this year. It would have to start in the next fiscal year.
But you would propose that it begin now?
Yes,
Okay,
I want to set the groundwork. I don't think we're going to move off. I think we know that there's some inconsistencies. We were told we could do it if we could live with the inconsistencies, that there's a homestead, but it's listed on the grant list as a farm. I think the listers will straighten that out. There's a couple things I'd like to do on that bill. One of them, if we can do it without disrupting anything any further or costing a lot of money to anyone, is we need to adjust that non-homestead, which I think in most towns now is lower than the homestead rate. We knew that would happen when we set it 20 years ago. It happened in Plainfield 15 years ago. But it's hit most towns. So in some of your ski towns, you know, with a lot of second homes, you're seeing those second homes pay a lower property tax rate than the residents. And that's great. So it's something we need to balance.
I just want to be extremely clear about that proposal, because that would be weighed against this one in some ways. You would still separate out second homes from the non-homestead rate so that we're not hitting residential rentals.
I would do, I think what was talked about is the same thing we did in property transfer. They don't have a resident, they don't have a landlord certificate. They aren't listed as a homestead and they aren't listed as commercial property. And there's some fuzz around the edges, but I have faith when money is at play, people will straighten it out. I'm sure we will miss some, but the bulk, we will. It's also something other states have been planning for either. One I'm familiar with is its proximity to the water. And you get rated on your property value there goes up, but it's, so you can look at that. But that's just what I'm thinking.
That sounds like Cape Cod.
It is. It goes up a lot if you're on the water, even if you get washed through it. Okay, so Kirby, the tax elements we have in this right now is the 3-year freeze on property value for restoring a blighted, non-code meeting house in a flood impacted area. That what we have.
Part of that, the blighted part's not part of that, the property. improvements, but
Okay,
yes,
it's just the damaged house.
flood related areas or flood impacted areas, yes.
Okay.
Is what we have. I can go through the whole thing here just so we can
Okay,
get a
that would be
10,000
good.
foot view.
Yeah.
Of what the amendment is doing right now, and then I will try to point out the appropriations differently. Overall, the Senate Finance Amendment reduces the appropriations, the money being spent by the underlying report.
Okay,
So I think that might have been lost, is that there's the changes in the amendment overall spend a lot less, and I think that was part of why we were asked by
Okay,
others to do it this way.
okay, when you say Senate Finance Amendment, you mean this, the whole amendment that was brought to us, but we haven't adopted yet?
It's what we've been talking about.
Okay.
The Senate Finance Amendment that we've been talking about since, I think, last Friday.
Okay,
That's what the Senate Finance Amendment is, and then the Senate National Report is the other column, which is the condition of it when it got here.
okay,
So,
It's your total.
Yeah, the totals, how much does the underlying spend and how much did the amendment reduce that by?
I would defer to John. I think it's at least 60 million less.
It's about a $60 million difference. Yep.
So it goes from what to what?
So I can just speak to the housing sections, but including both the housing program section and the mobile home section, the underlying report from Natural Resources has about 65 million. And you go down to about 4 million here in the same sections. So covering both housing policy and mobile homes, that's your gap there.
okay.
And I don't know if others wanted to chime in, but I saw Nancy
I'm
this.
gonna get a fiscal note, so Patrick, can you help us here?
Yeah.
When we say this is a spreadsheet for this bill that was brought to us by Senator Rob Hinsdale, is that what this is doing?
it's comparing that to the report that came to the
Underline.
committee.
Okay. I've already seen one thing in here that we need to do, which is the downtown tax credit. That isn't budgeted.
Right.
It's,
That's one of the cuts, one of the,
so that needs to get,
that's,
Transferred, so-
that's one of the things that the Senate Finance Amendment spends less money on.
It's in the Senate Finance.
yes. But if we don't, we're looking to see how much of that amendment we're gonna be able to get done. Senator Gray.
Right, so I just want to label my columns there. I know which, for sure, exactly which thing to look at. So that SNRE report is the 4-1 draft we
Yes.
came out. And then
This,
what's the right, amendments, name, date, stamp stuff for the amendment columns?
It's the most recent Senate Finance Amendment to 687, which is number,
John Gray, Ledge Counsel, sorry, I didn't say earlier, the amendment is also 4.1.
Well, that's what was throwing off, like, why is it 4-1?
I've
Whatever,
got
maybe it
three.
really just is by chance.
I've got 3-1, but all right, that's 4-1. So my notes are on 3-1.
You can retain your notes on 3.1. It is only one change
That's
between
what I
3.1 and 4.1, which I can call out to you if we get to that
Okay.
piece.
Senator Gray, you want a copy of
That
4-1?
would be great. 'cause-
And the date of that is April 17th, sorry, that's the date of the 4.1 amendment is April 24th, 4:09 PM.
Thank you very much.
so would you like me to walk
Yeah.
through? Okay, so the first thing the Senate Finance Amendment does, everyone knows what I mean when I say that, right? Is it removes the section, it removes section 63 from the underlying report. The financial difference there is that there was a 1.5 million appropriation in the underlying report for resiliency grants for municipalities. So the Senate Finance Amendment's cutting that, spending 1.5 million less.
Okay, I'm assuming that's because it isn't in the budget. It isn't?
I would defer to others that know the budget.
Okay,
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Is
go ahead.
The resiliency grants, are they in the budget?
Not to my knowledge.
More complicated. It's more
Can I
complicated.
clarify?
Yeah.
I tried to explain this the other day. Maybe Senator Gray remembers. We have an underlying municipal and regional planning program. We kept the piece, we kept that, and we kept the piece that changes the name to and resilience. But there was no additional 1.5 million to fund new resilience work. We, in our PTT proposal, that automatically adds because of the transfer to regional municipal planning that occurs from the PTT, 1.2 million to municipal and regional planning with resilience added to the name so they can use it flexibly for the land use maps and resilience work, which hopefully are related. So we'd be losing 1.2 million and we didn't remove the program.
So that's that.
They did get money in the budget. Then we also added money to the resiliency fund for towns that was in 310. It was there, but there wasn't any money in it. I know the budget. I think it's in the contingency, but there was, I thought, two things of money, Pat, there was some money put into that resiliency fund. From
There
310.
were from 311.
In the budget, I thought I remembered Senator Kitchell saying that they had put some money into the resiliency fund that was created in, because we didn't take it out. It got left in finance, approach took all the money out of it.
So Patrick enjoyed the fiscal office, I can get in touch with Brady, to
Okay.
just confirm the status of that.
Okay, I don't know what, but there is money in the budget for towns to do resiliency projects. It's,
Right.
I remember that
So when I say that that's being removed here, it's just this particular
piece.
appropriation for grants.
Right.
Not saying that there's not other
Right.
municipal grants out there.
I think we aren't taking all the money away from resilience.
So that's,
That's one
Yeah.
quick question. So Senator Rockington, were you saying that this version, in 63-15, that was going to be new money, but it was never budgeted for, and that's why you're talking about the PTT transfer, or backfilling?
No bill had ever budgeted for it.
I just want, I'm sending over.
This amendment is raising and allocating that amount of money.
the intent of the amendment, I think, my understanding is to balance things out. And since there
Yes.
wasn't a revenue source for
Right.
this 1.5 million, that's
Right,
why it's being.
it raises money. Additional money in some cases for projects.
For some of the appropriations in the bill.
Yeah.
But other appropriations from the underlying housing sections was removed.
Okay,
Okay, so that's section 63, section 72 removes increased caps for the downtown tax credits. The caps are in current law are at 3 million. The underlying report was going to increase that to 5 million, but the Senate
So-
Finance Amendment now
that is
Removes that.
still in this bill as it came to us.
it's in the bill as it came to you. The Senate Finance Amendment is removing it and so restoring the cap back down to 3 million. So that's 2 million less.
I thought that had happened before this.
So it's happening here.
Appropriations would have done it.
Yes, but right now, appropriations has done that, okay. So we have to do that. Okay, we're on 74 to 76.
So then section 73, which I apologize, I didn't include in the chart because it's the same both. That is the property transfer tax rate for second homes. And it raises revenue,
$12 million.
defer to JFO on that.
Property transfer tax on second homes, $12 million.
Yeah, Ted Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office, it is 12.74 if you net out, so the overall amount is 12.85 in revenue. If you net out the increase in exemptions, that is in the bill, then it's 12.74.
17, okay.
That's in both the underlying bill and the amendments.
Yes.
It's,
I'm sure,
yes,
I don't understand how one distinguishes a whole when it sells. For it to be a second home or not. And, my understanding was if there was an increase in property transfer tax. Where it went from one rate to a different rate. And you asked me, and I wanted to make some suggestions.
Yeah.
You asked me to get something
and we
right.
will,
I haven't, but I don't want
Okay.
to present it until. It's germane.
okay, so we will talk about that. This one doubles the rate on second homes, and basically, when you're closing, they're gonna say, is this gonna be your full-time residence or second home? Because you won't, we'll say, there'll probably be a check off somewhere in the property transfer tax But at closing, the people that are there generally know a lot more about what you're going to be doing with the house. But it'll be a question at closing, and your property transfer tax will double if you are a second home. And no distinction,
Change
I
your
know
mind within a week, but
you've already paid the tax.
I guess it's the first home. So I'll change my mind in a week.
That would be an issue.
So
Residency.
There's a definition of principal residence. You have to claim it as your principal residence, and if it's claimed in the higher rates not paid,
You have to pay.
in theory, the department could audit that and discover.
You
Or a
have to
landlord
pay, you have to
certificate.
pay income tax in this state. You have to pay basically income tax. This is your tax home. Therefore, you pay Vermont taxes. If you have another home in Florida, you'd be crazy to say that you live in Vermont 6 months in one day and not 6 months in one day in Florida, because you don't pay any income tax in Florida.
depending on where you live.
It depends on where you live. And what happens if you're buying that house because you really like it and it's on the market now, and that's gonna be the retirement home next year. You're paying double.
So maybe I'm being obtuse, but what's the connection between buying a house and whether it's first or second or third or fourth home? And simply in a property transfer tax. Why does a house not pay a property transfer tax based on its fair market value?
I believe it's been traditional, look at both, it's been traditionally just a tax, and as you pay more, you pay 1.2%. We've done some exceptions at the lower end, we've done a lower rate. And this does raise that lower rate, but you're paying, everybody's paying the same tax, but if the value you're paying on it is 600,000 as opposed to 300,000. Yes, it's house by house by house. Everybody is treated the same, but if you pay more, the more your house costs. It's a progressive.
Well, it's a percentage of what you pay is progressive, it's a percentage of what you pay.
Yes.
It would be progressive if you paid more when you got up above certain steps as you went up further.
There's
Yes, we have one.
waiting on a copy.
We're waiting on a copy.
Progressive is an adjective.
Why don't we finish through this, then you can decide if.
Trying to understand what the bill calls for, well, we got it before we hear about what it's supposed to.
Well,
So the report that the committee received, it's unchanged by the amendments, and that is to create a 2.5% rate for second homes. It's based on their value, as you were saying, just like the property transfer tax operates currently. But the base rate currently is 1.25%.
And it increases the exemption for homes that are DHFA.
Yes, and there's
The ones
a
that
lower
have
rate for a
subsidized
portion,
mortgages.
a lower rate for a portion of the value for principal residences.
So we create more exemptions, we double the amount of second homes. I would police that. You don't have a separate policing force if the tax department notices that you didn't pay it and that you are filing income tax or any other tax forms with the state, they can look at you.
I just wanted, since there's residency becomes important in how the taxes works. If you buy as a Vermonter and then a year later, you change your residency, retain the home. Is anyone monitoring to see that you're no longer a resident and that tax should be assessed? Like, are you ever ineligible? for the boost?
How I think it would work out, I mean, some of these decisions will be made by the department when the administers it, but the way I would see this working out is, you buy a residence. On the return, will this be your principal residence? Another question will be, do you plan to rent out for long-term rentals this residence? If you mark, no, it will not be a principal residence, no, I will not rent this out for long-term rentals, then it will be a 2.5% rate. If you, but let's say you do claim it's a principal residence. It would be to the department whether it's worth, if they're limited resources to audit that. But let's say that there is an audit and, some evidence exists as to whether, like, for instance, the person maybe did not file a homestead declaration, so that would raise a question. You said this was gonna be your principal residence, but you didn't file a homestead declaration.
Or a landlord certificate.
And the landlord certificate would show that it's being used as a long-term rental. So they would have ways to look into that. Now, it's not written for a time limit, like what you're suggesting,
Right.
so
You change residence a year later.
I would read it to look at the year after the purchase.
Yeah.
If it was used as a principal residence during that year, then there's nothing wrong with the return. But if it's claimed to be a principal residence and then with it even like and starting right away, it's not used as principal residence, I think that would be an instance where the tax would be due.
It will also apply to the Vermonter that buys a deer camp with an outhouse. So that's frequently been a stumbling block. It will apply to every second home.
Can I clarify that? When Commissioner Bolio came before us, he had different categories. And one was seasonal residences, so there is a way to distinguish between
we
seasonal
don't-
and not.
That's not in the bill now.
This is just on residential, which is separate from seasonal.
It is limited to residential
Is
properties. the
it,
two
so this would not apply to a camp that was not,
I think it would be up to the department to interpret what residential property means. There's not a definition in the bill for that.
okay.
And
So if it's a seasonal, uninsulated, unheated, no hot water camp, which is what my family camp was. I'm really good at washing dishes, heating water on the stove. And you could take a shower on the deck with cold water. I mean,
You probably sell for a heck of a lot less money, one that.
I can say.
but it is, but it was a seasonal, it still is. It's very cold to live in it in January. We have a lot of those in Vermont.
I can say with some certainty that a commercial property, industrial property would not have this 2.5% rate.
No, we know
attached to it.
commercial.
But as far as the types of properties you're talking about that are kind of an ambiguous area, I would defer to the department and maybe the department would need to actually spend some time in coming up with guidance to figure that out, to draw those lines. Unless we want to amend the bill now to clarify those questions, which we could do.
Because right now it just says second residence.
It's residential property, it will not be a principal residence
Primary
and will not have a.
So unless we put a seasonal home exemption in there, I think it will pick up the deer camps. They're separate homes.
It's statute tax, sale of dwellings. At a fixed rate now. In current,
It is, well, there's
Mostly
one
fixed
rate for below, I think it's 200.
now,
Now, no, right now, it was $200 when I was selling real estate. And then there's 1.2% tax on the value of everything over that. This extends the lower rate for some types of mortgages.
that's what the house is proposed.
I have no, the house hasn't proposed any.
Well, they proposed a value-based property transfer tax increase rather than a second home-based one. They raised in the couple million range different. Because
What did the house propose?
the House proposed tripling the property tax above $750,000 of value, but getting a bigger exemption under $200,000 of value.
It's changed, instead of having one property transfer tax rate, they've got a step rate.
No, they've got, the difference is, the bill we have only does second homes. It does all second
I'm
homes.
sure I feel out of my element. Usually when we have discussions like this, someone hands us a piece of paper and they give dollar figures and what the rate is and what the dollars are. And then on the next column is what the house or some
Okay.
other group
How
has.
about related spread,
And
you
we
don't
don't-
put Ted on the spot.
I haven't seen one of those.
Okay, I thought you were doing an
I-
amendment that would have been similar to the houses.
I'm doing an amendment that I think was different than what the House had and what has been proposed. But I don't know what we have before us.
Before us, we have a doubling of the property transfer tax
They're just.
for just second homes.
Do we have a sheet that charts that out?
We can
Yeah.
prepare that. We can prepare that.
We can get that, but we are not going to get this bill out today, which means there will be less time. I am under a lot of pressure from the powers that be,
Well,
but.
as one
these
senator, I
people-
would back you up on moving on the pace at which you're comfortable with, and I hope that we would be
The
comfortable.
pace that I'm comfortable with has nothing to do with the requirements that are being put on me.
Again, I don't wanna put Ted on the spot, but there is a chart that can show us this, I think at the next hour or so. Only because right now what we're doing is doubling it, so that's a clean, we now raise 12.85 million, we can add 12.85 million.
Doubling the amount of money raised or you're changing the structure of how it's raised.
We're doubling the amount raised just on particular homes.
Yes.
So overall, the PTT is a much larger pot of money, but when you single out these homes, they're taxed at 12.85 million now, and we'd be adding 12.85 million.
We're doubling the tax on second homes. We don't have a way, except maybe some vague state audit, to police that. So if you lie and next week it's your second home, the police aren't knocking on your door. It will double it for second homes only. The house double, well, they have a more stepped rate if it's over 750,000. Just vaguely, they are charging you 3.5%.
It's 3.65.
So they're taxing rich people's houses.
Perhaps you're
It might not be, $600,000 doesn't buy you a whole lot in the city of Montpelier.
On this point, an important point, I'm
Yeah.
under the impression the House also did disambiguate non-homesteads, so rental, multifamily units, those things that are like $2 million, $4 million, they would also pay, which could really work against us. So
Yes.
the disambiguation of this bill is great about looking for second homes to tax, because that aligns
Yeah.
some of our occupancy.
And if I may I?
Yes.
It's helpful to sort this out now because the same issue could come up with property taxes.
This issue that is going to come up with property taxes, they are our biggest and best way, and if we want to go home and say, you're looking at a 20-cent increase and, oh, we dropped it too. That's not gonna help people a whole lot. I am really worried about people losing their homes.
Whether we
Because,
wanna go home or not is different from what it says.
can I finish? Okay, thank you. I am concerned about that. I would like to be able to raise some more money while we try and transition to a more economical school system, but that's not gonna happen. People that are buying $600,000, and I will live this little ranch at the end of my street that went for almost 500,000. People just starting out and buying a first home, they are leveraged to the hill, and we're gonna hit them with a $3,000 property tax increase.
Just to clarify, though, that the House's proposal was 750, so 600 would still be 100.
No, but I mean, now, the property taxes on my house, which is appraised at what that house just sold for, are going to go up $3,000 this year. And so you're gonna see a lot of homes, because we have had a lot of reappraisals and a lot of higher values. People are going to get thousands of dollars in property tax increases. So you're gonna hit those of us that aren't moving out of the family homestead because there's nowhere to go. And you're gonna get the young couples or people who have just bought a home and are heavily leveraged. I'm concerned about that possible impact, and your rents will go up because they're property taxes. I don't think we can hit the second home market twice. That's all I'm saying. So if we make this decision now, we are making the decision that we aren't gonna be looking at some form of second home or other money to put in to be yield building.
I do just wanna say for people who might be thinking about both and here, this would apply this year and give tax the ability to start differentiating what a second home is. And when people pay the property transfer tax and then the property tax, they are double hit. So you are a principal residence homeowner, you're paying the property transfer tax, then the same year you're paying the property tax. Mind you, it could be more expensive because of the last person who owned the house. And
You're also
what we're
paying
saying
off their
is,
property, if they receive, you close in mid-year, and they received a property tax credit, and you haven't lived in the state and don't qualify, you have to pay off the
right,
prorated value
Right.
of their property tax.
so that's already something that happens unfortunately in our system. This would be doing that same thing, but at differentiated rates for second homeowners. So I think there are those of us who are willing to entertain both.
You're talking about the short-term rental tax.
No, I'm sorry, not
Second home
sure.
tax, a property transfer,
They're,
and a second home.
they're not mutually exclusive. People already pay the PTT and then the PT. We'd be saying if you're taking this out of the housing market for principal residences,
Just to clarify
Okay,
this.
I'm gonna cut off this discussion because I wanna get through, we have to get through the amendments. Then we have to get through the bill so we know what we're amending. Because there aren't just tax amendments on here. There are housing, and I don't know if there's Act 250 amendments, but there are other things. And I think we're not getting this bill out, and at the rate we're going, we're cutting you down to 1 week of committee of conference. So we're under some pressure, so I wanna just go through the rest of these. We are obviously not agreed. But I will not be proposing a second home tax if we do the property transfer. I think that will trigger people leaving the market. But
The tiny thing I was gonna say is, as best I can understand from talking to something on Hinsdale, when we hear about the House proposal and because the Senate National report built on what the House sent us, you can go looking at it and you won't find what we're talking about because it's a different House bill. It's
Yes,
829.
So
it's,
there's another bill to keep your eye on if you're trying to follow all the pieces.
okay.
Quick clarification, the yield bill from the House does not have a second home tax. You're contemplating us considering adding it as.
All the, wow,
The yield, I can answer that,
Yeah.
that's possible. The yield bill has cloud tax. Short-term rentals. And the rest of it is, education property tax like normal.
and the short-term rental though is an increase in the rooms and meals tax. At least that's what was there.
It would be effectively an increase in rooms tax for short-term rentals by 1.5%.
And I'm,
I gotta split the baby solution, but I'll talk to you. about
okay,
it.
I mean, I am uncomfortable with
But there's,
doing that and not because motels are also short-term rentals. So we are splitting that category and taxing one section of it differently than the other. I just have some concerns about the legality of doing.
but yeah, no transfer tax.
Right.
There's transfer taxes in 829, which hasn't gone anywhere, and.
Well, some of it's.
Right. And that's it.
Just the disability policy related stuff from 6:30.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's finish walking through this.
great.
Then we're gonna walk through the bill because I don't know what's in this bill. I don't know what natural resources has done. Natural resources people, I don't know,
Okay,
because it's been a huge bill and everyone's been rushed now.
okay. So moving on with the comparisons between this amendment and the underlying report. The underlying report had, it changed the statutory transfer tax allocations for VHCB, Municipal and Regional Planning Fund, and General Fund. Those statutory allocations were removed. It's staying current law under the amendment. Instead, there's just fiscal year 25 allocations for the additional property transfer tax revenue that would be created by the second homes change. So if the second homes change is removed, something to keep in mind is that the additional revenue should be accounted for. In other words, removed from the amendment, maybe also.
So on that one, in other words, the redivvying up of the current PPP stream is replaced by just taking all the new money and directing it. Catch up and read the text.
So, Senator Bright, in your underlying bill, you had the property transfer tax and you allocated 2 million to Act 250 permits.
We did that.
So much of our,
In this bill,
much of our committee report took 311 and pulled it all. Where the first roughly 30 sections is for the most part where natural did work, because that was planning oriented. And then once you got to the more business, tax credits and
transfer tax.
yeah, all sections 30 and on, basically, I think almost verbatim, they came into the report. So there's a great deal of 311 that's in 60%.
So the underlying bill has 2 million. I assume that's the PTT was raising the same amount. It's just that in this amendment, we reduced the Act 250 permit fund amount and allocated that somewhere else than was in the original bill, but I assume the PTT is raising the same amount of money.
So to clarify all that, so yes, 2 million was allocated from the PPP revenue. This is meant, it is meant to be some of the
And it's the
additional
same
revenue.
PTT as we've got in.
But it's being reduced here to 900,000, but that would be in statute, 900,000 per year, just like the 2 million would have
I
been.
thought it was
in
just
statute
for
for-
this year.
There's also, in the Senate Finance Amendment, there's another 400,000 for this year.
I'm gonna stop calling it the Senate Finance because we haven't, this is Senator Ron Hinsdale's proposal to us to adopt, but we haven't, the only thing we've adopted so far is the flood,
Mhm.
the flood ravaged communities property tax freeze.
It's a proposed Senate Finance Amendment.
Yes, that works.
Okay, so in the proposed amendment, there's some differences. It is a reduction. It's not the full 2 million. It's 900,000 plus another 400,000 that's appropriated for this year. I'll also point out that the extra revenue from the second homes, how that's allocated under the proposed amendment is 5.1 million to the trust fund, to the housing trust fund. and 1.27 million to municipal and regional planning. So for this year, for this fiscal year, 25, there's those additional amounts. So if again, that's something else to balance. If the second home's revenue disappears, if that could affect that. Okay. So we talked about the Act 250 permanent fund difference. There's also a conforming change in section 78 of the underlying bill that is not changed by the proposed amendments. The section 79 of 83 of the underlying reports were changed by this committee so far to alter the administration's proposed property freeze program to for flood impacted communities. One difference there though is the underlying report, the only difference between the administration's proposal and the underlying report was the administration had proposed a freeze of 5 years, underlying report is 2 years. This committee for the proposed amendment changed that to 3 years, but limiting it to
Years, and we do have a fiscal on that, so we'll get that.
So that's the differences there. In section 84, the underlying report did have the property tax exemption for the property transfer tax exemption for blighted properties. The proposed amendment has removed that. There is, and they've removed that proposal from the administration. Section 85, the underlying report had the income tax benefit for continuing care retirement communities, the Wake Robin. That's removed in the proposed amendment. And then sections 86 and through 87 of the underlying report were the housing policy sections that John started to get into yesterday. Taking the housing policy questions out of it, the details of that out of it, the money part is that it's about the underlying report was spending about 60 million more on those housing proposals than what the proposed amendment spends.
Okay.
So some of the stuff John was going through was actually reductions in appropriations for those things. And then I would defer to John, of course, about the details about what all that is.
Was this, one of these was, BHFA. It was a compliance. This isn't the section that BHFA was concerned about, or,
They were concerned about the accessibility section,
Yeah.
which is section 92.
okay. And I think yesterday, there was kind of a common agreement to strike 92.
Yep, and we actually have prepared, in the event that's the sole change requested, we have a draft ready that deletes that section specifically.
They work very hard, but getting single family units in here, and given Vermont's topography, it's not always possible to have them be able to have a ramp, without steps up the front stairs. So some of the units might not be handicap accessible, but they were. But this is 3 and under.
That's correct.
They work as hard as they can. I assume if you had to put an elevator in a duplex.
Just to call it technically, the section would not require that, but I did get the sense yesterday that the committee was largely in agreement as to the approach taken here, and we have that ready if that's what you guys want to do.
That was my understanding. Okay, so 92 has to go. We can keep moving.
So sections 106 to 108 of the underlying report related to mobile homes. Again, I'm not going to speak to the housing details, housing policy details, but the money gist of it is that the underlying report was spending about 3 million, appropriating about 3 million. This proposed amendment spends about 1 million.
This is all PTT money, right?
This is where, before when we were talking about using the second home PTT revenue for certain things. This part is where I'm not sure. It's kind of all fungible anyway.
we didn't have any money. Appropriations in the budget spent all the money we had. So,
I would defer to JFO whether
Yeah.
all of the appropriations in this bill, are they all from the second home revenue or not?
So, one thing I can offer is we have a summary, table, which I haven't shared with you
Okay.
yet, but I can share that with the committee. Just to show you how things are balanced in this proposed amendment. So the revenue generated from the change in the exemption threshold and the second homes, all of that is being accounted for either through those notwithstanding allocations, coming off the top to go to the NRV for their lost fee revenue, and then these appropriations being made from the general fund from the allocation.
Okay.
So it should be sort of like a flow chart.
okay, we will come you up next. Let's continue to walk through this.
That was one thing I wasn't sure of, okay. And then, section 113 has an appropriation of $10,500 for, this is for compensation for members of a landlord tenant law study. There was no appropriation in the underlying report.
Okay,
And section 113A is a long-term affordable housing study, and the underlying report did not have that study. And section 113B is the $400,000 appropriation for NRV for this fiscal year that we had talked about a little bit before. And that appropriation was not in the underlying reports, but also the underlying report had a $2 million appropriation that is now $900,000.
okay. Okay. All right, that's all that. What section is the actual PTT language in?
73.
Section. Okay, I'll find it. $72. Okay. Any questions for Kurt? Okay, do I have that come up and we can get some numbers.
Did we hold the vote open for me?
We're all set to vote, you missed it. I don't have a section 73 on my amendment, I have 74.
The reason why 73 is not in the amendment is because it's not being changed. It's in the underlying report.
It's 73 is in the underlying, the same property transfer tax stuff is in the underlying.
Yes.
Okay, that helps. Then I have to find it too. All right. Okay, let's move on to what it's been processed.
Thirty-three, if you're looking for is on page 134.
Okay. Oh. There's a flash bulb coming up. Okay, so, all right. Okay,
So what you see on the screen is, this is just related to the proposed amendment. So the pieces you see in here, so section 73, you have two pieces from the underlying bill. There's the second homes PPPT and the threshold exemption change. So the second home by itself is 12.85 million in total revenue. That exemption change reduces that by about 110,000. In the next line down, so section 77, that's something that's being changed with this proposed amendment from 2 million down to 900,000. That reflects the estimated loss in Act 250 permit revenue for the NRV. So this is in effect making them whole. My understanding, the reason that this is put in here is coming off the top is that is a loss in fee revenue that will be felt in perpetuity. So it sort of accounts for ongoing costs going forward. So the next thing, the next section we get here has to do with the notwithstanding language. For the PTT revenue, so currently in the budget, as it is coming out of the Senate. There are existing notwithstanding language sections that allocate PTT revenue among the general fund, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Trust Fund, and the municipal and regional planning fund. So these amounts you see here are in addition to what's in the budget.
So in the budget, there are property transfer tax revenues from the present property transfer tax that are allocated to the tune of 5.4 million. 22. Okay,
This is an additional 5.5-ish on the 22 that was not withstood and allocated to VHCB in the budget from the existing property transfer.
so in that budget,
Correct.
VHCB normally gets not withstood because they're supposed to get 50% and they never get it because we need it somewhere else. So they didn't get their 50% this year. So. All right, so. By doing this property transfer tax addition. We are picking up $900,000. Okay, and we are making the Housing and Conservation Board whole.
I don't know if I'd say whole to Ted
But
for
we're
that, but
giving-
they're,
Okay, so we're giving extra funds to regional planning, to housing and conservation, to yeah, who else are we doing funds to? Everybody we've just been through. Regional planning, housing and conservation,
so if I may just say a
yeah,
couple of things, so
Yeah.
the municipal regional planning fund. That 1.28 here
yeah,
that is something Senator Rob Hinsdale was referencing before with regards to the resiliency
yeah,
piece of it. That 1.5 million that was originally appropriated in 311 and is coming to the committee as it is in 687 with 1.5. That is not in the budget.
right,
There's resiliency money for other reasons.
yes,
But not specifically
for
for the
the regional
purposes
plan.
in here. Also, there's some
right,
flexibility that they can use this for. I know you haven't had a walkthrough from Ellen, but there's the whole mapping.
yes,
Process that RPCs are gonna have to go through for the tier designations. So that money is sort of ostensibly meant to be used for that purpose. And also not shown here, that there are several VHCB programs that at one point or another have been sort of viewed as priorities for them to use dollars for those programs. And the idea, rather than being prescriptive, like things like farm worker housing was one of those things on that list, rather than being prescriptive of which programs they can spend that money on. By just allocating that this way, they can use it as needed
As
for
needed.
those several
okay,
the black box at the bottom, that fits into that allocation you see on line 7, the 5.4 million. Those are appropriations coming from the general fund for the appropriations that John has in the in the proposed amendment.
these are allocations coming from the general fund,
Those particular ones are appropriations.
those,
It's kind of budget jargon, I guess.
the second box at the bottom.
Yes,
That is being paid for out of the new property transfer tax.
that's
It
correct.
is not in the budget.
That's correct.
Okay,
It's suggested by the House.
no, it is not in the budget as we,
Paid for by the new property.
it is paid for by the new property transfer tax.
As suggested by the House.
No,
It's probably suggested by who?
There's a little bit of
Senator
flow.
Rob Hinsdale.
if I could, the NRB staff attorneys was proposed by the House and not funded anywhere else. The Land Access Opportunity Board was proposed by the House budget and not funded anywhere else. And we are looking at adding the NRB board member allocation so they can start earlier.
As suggested by Senator Hinsdale, in lieu of what the House has proposed.
I've gathered these.
The House proposed 100 and.
No,
Okay.
this budget is allocated. It is not going through this tax raising bill. Now, remember, we have killed every one of the House bills that have done this because we raise a tax to fund a specific program. It does not go through the budgetary, what is the highest need and where should the money go? So some of these things were not done in the House budget and they were not done in our budget. No one's arguing that they're good things, but this committee is being asked to raise and to allocate the money in this way. By the amendment which has been presented to us.
Could I add a clarification?
Yeah.
They are almost all existing appropriations from the Senate Natural Resources report as well. The only one that's not is the staff attorney. Everything else was voted out of natural resources in your report, so they don't change. They're just lessened.
So how much is our colleague asking us to raise, and how would she have us do it?
This share, we are raising $900,000 by doubling the property transfer tax. No, what do we?
So the proposed amendment has the two PTT pieces. The net amount raised is $12.74 million.
Where did I get 900?
That is just the amount coming off the top and being sent to the NRB to make up for lost fee.
Okay, so,
The rest is being spent based on this
Here.
construct.
I don't care how it's being spent.
okay, we are being asked to raise it by doubling the property transfer tax on second homes.
How much will be asked to raise?
12 million some dollars.
Okay, and we have a proposal on how we might do that, Jen. From
Well,
our colleague.
what, we are not being, earlier this year, we were asked to raise $18 million to balance the budget. This is not that kind of being asked. These are things that were not funded to this level. Some of them weren't funded in the budget. We are being asked to double the property transfer tax on second homes to fund these programs.
We're being asked to raise some money, and we're being given a recommendation on how to do it.
If that's what you want me to say, Senator, yes.
So how much are
I'm
we
running
being
Socratic
asked to
method.
raise?
In order to do all of this, we need to raise 12 point something, how much we raised. About $12 million, plus another couple hundred.
Senator Hinsdale has recommended to us how we could raise the $12.5 million.
Yes, and it was in 311 and now it's in
I
687.
don't care where it is.
Okay.
There,
How do
311
you
is good.
recommend
Didn't
that we
make
raise them?
Hmm?
How do you recommend that we raise them?
Doubling the property transfer tax on homes that do not have a landlord certificate or a homestead declaration placed on them in the first year of purchase.
And we have a comment from the tax department on how they would successfully comply with your request. Or your recommendation.
Are you asking?
I've not testified in this committee on that. I would be happy to.
Do you want to come up and testify? Well, you can have the comfortable seat for a few
Would
minutes.
you like me to now?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Very good question to get at this point. You like yourself.
You can check that one out.
However,
Hi there.
I'm Craig Foley of Tax Commission. Thanks for having me. Do you want me to speak to, everything that I brought today or just that specific point? I only have a
Probably
post.
while you've got the chair, you
Sure.
might, but I think the first question is great. This whole property transfer tax proposal, and I think I don't know that we've asked you your philosophical perspective. I think, Senator, it was on, could it be raised or could it be done if you got a,
Yeah, it's actually related to that. So the property transfer tax occurs in one time-ish when the property transfers. A property tax surcharge on second homes is an annual thing that we're contemplating. So there's a big difference there. So my question to you is both on the feasibility of the contemplated property transfer tax surcharge, whatever you want to call it, on second homes. And follow me here, because I think Senator Cummings to what I've heard you talk about this. Imagine a world where we don't hit those second home purchasers twice, but instead, when they purchase a home and qualify to be a second home, that's not getting all the existing second homes out there, which we have a ton of them. I'm also worried about arm's length and not arm's length transactions between family members where it doesn't have a, they change it for $10. But my point is, second homes would be every year feeding the ed fund. If there was a property tax on second homes, that would every year feed the ed fund a little bit more, which would be great. And the property transfer tax would be one time feeding other things like the VHCB when property exchange hands. So instead of hitting them twice, what if we imagine a world where, let's say, a $600,000 home that pays the 0.125% for the 1.25% second home surcharge? That's $7,500. If they could, and this still makes the money's work and it still raises more money for the state, but if that could be, this is where I think I'm gonna make the commissioner cringe, if that could be
I think
used
it's
as
already
a
cringing.
credit against their next year's property taxes, second home surcharge, we still are raising more money. We wouldn't be hitting the second homeowners twice, but most importantly, with the second home property tax increase, we would get existing homes out there raising more money for the ed fund, aligning our tax policy with our occupancy desires,
That is a creative way of getting around,
not getting twice.
not hitting them twice.
So
Tax commissioner,
I think if, let me make sure I heard what you said. So you're thinking if there is a higher property transfer tax rate that would be paid by second homeowners, they then get a credit of whatever that delta is on their next property taxes?
Correct. Which would also be getting a second home property tax additional hit. So it would basically go against that probably 1 year. I calculate $7,500 they're paying that year, against probably 18,000, maybe an $18,000 additional penalty for being a second home, but it'd be about equal. But importantly, we would be getting continued revenue on existing second homes and those exchanged from families that aren't going through the PTT.
So, at first blush, logistics are a concern of like, we have a mechanism to get what we call property tax credits on homesteads. So this would be expanding that. It's a complicated process. It's an onerous process. And I don't know that I can speak credibly to like how feasible it is. You've also got different funding mechanisms there, right? I assume you would be talking about a credit against only education taxes. So you'd be talking about education fund, whereas the property transfer tax is split a number of different ways, and then also the general fund as well. I mean, at a high level, I would say the administration does not believe there's a need to raise taxes to meet the investments in housing that are
that
necessary.
was pretty unfair to ask you.
You know, and at the tax department, what I'm focused on right now, and I think there needs to be discussion on, and I've heard some of the concerns raised today, are definitions. Right, so it's not clear to me what happens with mixed use property. I think that needs to be well defined. If there's a 5-unit dwelling where there's 4 short-term rentals and 1 long-term rental, is that higher rate or lower rate? I think it's a great question about
intention versus ultimate action, right? If you buy it with all the intention of the world of it being a long-term rental, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't turn out that way, and a year later, we don't find a landlord certificate, and we go and say, what happened? And they said, well, I meant to, and then it just didn't happen. Like, where's the threshold by which the intention was enough to get the lower rate versus we need to build them back because it didn't ultimately happen? Maybe intention is irrelevant, but it's not clear to me. I think the question about camps is an important one as well, right? There are, and earlier the discussion was, well, there are different grand list categories. That's true. I'm not aware of them being defined in statute. There is a requirement in statute that grand list has categories. Those are informational only today. That's one of the discussions we had before about second homes. And those are not defined in law. So if you're going to define residential in this law, I would say we need to actually define what residential means. Without an additional clarity for that definition, I would take residential to mean a dwelling. If that's not what's intended, then I think there needs to be more definitions on that.
A deer camp with an outhouse hardly meets my definition of a residential dwelling. I'm sure it's on the grand list because that impacts the appraisal. They're not going to appraise it at the same, anywhere near the same rate they would a year-round house with heating, usually insulation, indoor plumbing.
So I think that should either be defined or be referenced somewhere to be defined. And I would also flag, I think, Ledge Council can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm worried that the effective date on that section wasn't brought over and it might be effective on passage, which is impossible.
Okay.
That is.
On the effective
Okay,
date.
thank you.
And then Senator
Commissioner, do you remember where I got the definition for this proposal?
Yes, from our report on different ways to potentially tax second homes.
No.
Oh, well then, no, I don't know. Please tell me.
I got it from your definition of how you would treat the property tax freeze on blighted properties that were rehabbed.
Okay,
So that you said to us, we don't want to give this tax break to short-term rentals or non-residential use property. And so we would look for a landlord certificate or a homestead declaration.
correct.
And I did point that out to you in committee that in economic development, that I got the definition from your definition of how you would treat the property tax freeze.
Yeah, sure. So that's like, if you have a landlord certificate or a homestead declaration, you are definitely either a long-term rental or a homestead. Just because you are lacking both of those things does not mean you are a second home.
But you would have to do the same defining for the property tax freeze.
No, because that's only going to people that are long-term rentals or homesteads. It's not then saying absent that, you're definitely a second home. I'm not sure I'm totally following. I'm trying to answer your question, but I'm not sure I'm totally following. It doesn't feel the same to me.
Really, because you were going to look at residential property that were blighted. And only give an exemption to ones that were being used as a primary residence.
Correct.
And how you define that was no landlord certificate and no homestead declaration.
Correct, but that's a proactive application to get a property tax freeze when you're saying I am a homestead. Right, it's like the same way that we do homestead versus non today. Homestead is defined as homestead and we're occupied, and non-homestead is everything else.
But you still have to verify that somehow.
We don't verify,
You weren't gonna verify the property tax freeze was only going to primary residences.
Absolutely, there's an application process with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
It's a 3-year property tax freeze or a 2-year or 5-year.
Yeah, they have an annual certification.
And-
But I
but you
think
don't
what
go
you're
out
saying
and
is
inspect.
just because they don't have those things, they're definitely a second home. I can't agree with.
No, I'm saying you were gonna use the same metric to go out and see if there's a problem. If they don't file one of those, they wouldn't get the property tax freeze.
Correct. But that's because they would have agreed to a program that said they will do one of those things.
So it's the honor system. They
Well-
fill out the application, they say they're going to do this. You don't, or ACCD doesn't go out 3 years later and inspect, I wouldn't think.
Well, I mean, under the guise of that yeah, they have to continue to certify on an annual basis.
Okay, but self-certification, they certify.
And we can also check homesteads and landlord certificates. But again, I think the difference there is they are part of a program that says they will be one of those categories.
Okay.
And what we're talking about here is just saying anyone that's not in one of those categories is a second home. And second homes are definitely not in one of those categories. But just because you're not in one of those categories,
Doesn't.
you are certainly a second home. That's not the case.
You did testify in economic development that you could feasibly do this.
I said they were a reasonably clever definition and said that there were challenges with the definitions with things like mixed use property.
There's gray areas here
Yes,
where sometimes people don't fill out the homestead. We've got enough towns where the non-homestead is a lower tax rate than the homestead. It's illegal, but we don't file.
yeah, I mean, look, we put forward that exact definition and I don't remember what the report that I spoke about when I came in on second homes before. That was one of the options we flagged, as you said, as I said, you could say it as not a landlord certificate, not a homestead. But there are a lot of challenges with the grand list categories
You
on
would
that. so
pick
it's
up
not
some
perfect.
farms
Correct. Well, you
that have a
probably exclude.
homestead on it. And they might, depending on what their economic value is, and if we want the homestead to have any meaning, we're going to have to get that balance between the non-homestead and the homestead, because I have no incentive if I'm not saving any money if you have the homestead, so we have that issue to deal with. Senator McDonald.
So, Mr. Sure. In the sale of deer camps that may or may not have outhouses in them, is there
I hope they're not in there.
is pretty, I think that's recent. Is there any difficulty in assessing the fair market value of those?
I don't know that I can speak credibly to that one way or another. That's done at the local level, right? I'd be happy to ask my team about that, what they know. And the message that I've gotten from my team, right, is that those categories are informational today. They're not the basis by which we tax somebody more or less.
On the property transfer tax?
On property tax.
Transfer.
Well, it's
The
in your appraisal,
categories,
it's in your appraisal.
That's
If you're
right.
seasonal, you're appraised a lot less. But, yeah,
When
that helps.
when a dwelling sells, be it a deer camp or a chalet on the top of the hill overlooking the Connecticut River, you have a difficulty in knowing how much to tax them?
well, you're saying on the sale, so on property
On the
transfer
property
tax?
transfer tax.
I mean, that's just the sale price. So.
So that's
it's not-
simple, you can administer that.
Yeah, and there are categories on that form, again, purely informational.
So, so administratively, the current system works pretty well.
It's a complicated form, but sure, it's a simple, in terms of the rate and categories, that's not what's adding complexity today. No,
With property transfer tax?
Property transfer tax.
You have to have a lawyer.
Yeah, they're generally filed by real estate.
If it's a dwelling, it's basically taxed the same, whether it's a second home or a third home or a fourth home, but is it not?
You get, there is a favorable rate for the first 100,000 of value if it's being used as a primary residence.
It's $200 for that first category.
It's done by intention, right? This is intended to be used as a primary residence.
Yeah, and now I'm gonna ask your opinion on is the purchase of homes that are on the market that then become used for something other than primary residences. Is that one of the driving factors on our shortage of places for promoters to live?
As tax commissioner, I'm not sure I can speak with the authorities. I don't have that data at my fingertips.
Okay, I guess we have to ask someone.
We have to have ACCD.
Okay, thank you.
I'd be happy to talk to Commissioner Farrell
He's
to
not-
discuss that.
He was here yesterday.
We do have the highest rate of non-primary residences in the country.
But is that affecting our ability to house our citizenry?
I think so.
Senator I think you know it is.
Okay,
I think it also raises prices.
pardon?
I think it also raises prices,
Which makes,
Supply and demand.
which causes part of the housing crisis, yeah, that people are priced out.
So if we're going to a place, Madam Chair, to raise some money,
Yeah.
why don't we go to collect some money on the property transfer tax that they discourage people buying it for something that it's not gonna be their primary residence?
That's what taxes do, right? You tax me more, but you get less of it. Not Ted Barnett said that, no, somebody said that.
Okay.
That relationship, you tax anything,
Yeah.
you tax anything more. Right, that's, you tax income more, you get less of it, you tax cigarettes more, you get less of it, you tax housing more, you get less of it, anything you tax.
So we get less, likely to get less people buying empty homes for second homes, and we get less of those sales. Would we not?
Then we might get that.
Again, I think that if you tax something more, you get less. So I think you're saying if you were to tax second homes
If
more, you
they're
get
not-
less. I
If
think
they're
so.
not being sold for second homes because they're getting taxed more, would there be more on the market? Would the price drop?
Possible.
Pardon?
It's possible.
But if the demand is there, the price is not going to drop, so if you have
So
pent up.
You've got a
demand-
revenue source that just urges people from buying it for second homes if you tax them more. And might lead to the sale price going, so that the transportation. Why is that not a good source, having a tiered system where the more expensive the house is, the greater the percentage of property transfer tax the buyer would pay?
Except if you do what you want, Senator, and you stop second home sales, you aren't going to make the money. If your goal is to stop people from out of state, and I would suggest.
That's my goal.
All right, to stop Vermonters and people from out of state from buying a second home, which is a major part of our economy. So if you don't have those tourists, you're going to have some economic impact. But the rich people, who we don't like the most, are not going to be affected because they can pay the extra $1,000. It's your middle income people that are going to be hurt the most. They are the ones who will stop buying.
I like rich people in Vermont. I just,
I
I
do too.
don't want them having empty houses sitting on that house.
The problem is we don't have any empty houses. But we have a demand and we are not building to fill that demand, which is.
Which demand are we building for, the second home market, or for Vermont residents that can't afford homes?
We have a base affordability problem in this country. Let me finish. The cost of building an average house is well over $300,000. The average Vermonter can afford somewhere around $250,000. That is a starter home. You have to have a basement in Vermont. That's our base problem. The cost of building is higher than the average Vermonter can afford. That's so if builders build their lowest priced house, we still would have a lot of people who couldn't afford it. And now we're gonna increase their property taxes 15%. No, we, right now, unless we find a whole lot of money to put into the ed fund, are increasing people's property taxes 15%.
Madam Chair, I don't disagree with you, but when we try and look at a segment of what we're working on, which has been defined as taxing second homes differently as Senator has proposed, and we try and get to the bottom of that, you're suggesting we leave that alone and get back to the other problem, which is the schools.
No, I'm suggesting that I would say that the greatest need is right now, the property tax increase.
then maybe we ought to end this discussion about second homes, and property transfer taxes.
I would love.
And go to the next one, but I have trouble when we're trying to nail something down that we slide off into something, a different topic. And because there's always a different topic to slide into.
And I'm sure the tax commissioner would also like to answer if he's ready to tax all second homes differently.
No, we already had that testimony.
Well, I
I
would just
think
like,
it's
right,
if we would have to live with the discrepancies. The farmhouse that's not, it's listed as a farm, not as a, a homestead.
yeah, I would say two things on that. One, your characterization of the current categories is correct. You have some that I think folks would say that should have counted as a second home, and doesn't. I also, as I flagged before, right, you guys have already charged us with a big report that's due in either December or January on this very topic. So I can't promise what the outcome is there, but we have been asked to answer this question, think about ways to further disambiguate the categories, and we are working on that report.
And we could do things pending in that.
Can I try,
Yeah,
what should, I think will be an easier topic?
yes.
This is maybe small, but section 99, page one, I think if everybody's looking at draft 4.1,
The big heavy bill.
page 166 has data sharing for landlord certificate data. I was very appreciative that the Senate Economic Development Committee restored the confidentiality provisions to landlord certificate data, and then had some sharing to Vermont Emergency Management and Department of Housing and Community Development. I think the department might have even proposed the switch language there and got used. In discussing it further with my team and our disclosure officer, I have what I think is a pretty non-controversial change, which is in 3102 where tax confidentiality is. There's a section for shall disclose and a section for may disclose. And the shall is really, there's probably 7 or 8 of it, and it's really limited to court orders, judicial orders, and sharing with the Attorney General's office. That makes up the lion's share of those. And then almost all the real sharing that happens with the tax department is in the may section. And I'd like to move that sharing to that. It provides additional flexibility both for the tax department and the receiving agencies. We found that over time, maybe the needs of the receiving agencies change. And so we all want to be thoughtful about if somebody doesn't need something anymore, we don't have to send it anymore. And that gives us the opportunity to work that out with the receiving agency instead of having to come back. I have language. I
You
can
got
provide.
language, okay.
We also already have language drafted that does this, so.
Totally fair. Yeah, I'm happy to work in this.
Keep it that easy, shall to may?
Say
Just
again?
the court ordered folks go from shall to may?
Sorry, there's like 2 sections. The stuff in the shall is like judicial order, court order, Vermont Attorney
Okay.
General, and then the may is like we have Vermont Department of Labor, Financial Regulation, DEVA. There's a bunch of different agencies that we help with like their own tax administration.
Okay.
So, I mean, what I would say, right, I recognize that's going from a shall to a may with discretion. I would just say like, I'm not aware of anybody ever saying, hey, the tax department was supposed to give me this data and they're refusing because it's in the may section. Like we work out opportunity. So I'm still committed to doing what we had worked out in that section. I'd just rather do it under the may than the shall and not expand that shall
Since we're
section.
exempting ourselves from the data privacy law, I feel more comfortable with mays than shells. Because
PUC gonna be
we need to.
We work, the discussion that I had with them is part of why I'm here today to talk about it. Helped sort of, yes, we've come to agree.
Okay, may it all be that easy. I think we're all agreed that we'll do the may. Sounds like it's drafted.
Yeah, we've got stuff, just moves from D to E.
Okay, I had some other stuff.
Okay.
I would be remiss if I didn't say the administration would love to see the 5-year freeze restored and not restricting on counties. I would note that the 5 counties that would be excluded under current drafting are Addison, Franklin, Essex, Grand Island, Bennington. And I think all of those could use community revitalization as well. And bummed that the property transfer tax exemption is getting pulled out too. I think that was a relatively low cost incentive.
We're gonna
option.
have Ted's gonna give us, before we make any decisions on these things, I'm gonna that's got a fiscal analysis for us, so we will listen to that.
Well, I love your support. That's my postcard.
That's not as easy as the last request.
Well, that's reason why I'll raise my hand and say thank you for that thought. Because we're between 215, 310, there's a lot of programming going on that's
Oh, yes.
flood specific, and related.
Well, while we have the commission here. If we were making a choice between the property transfer tax and the property tax this year for a increase or a differentiation and a change, would you be asking to testify in the next 2 weeks that you could not do a property tax increase next year?
Sorry to say, you mean changing, property tax increase like for second homes
Yes,
for fiscal year 25?
yes.
I don't think that's feasible for fiscal year
I think we
25.
don't, and I told the committee earlier, we can't do this year.
I'm sorry, for fiscal year 26. I mean, you'd be doing it in the year 25 for fiscal year 26.
So it would be the April 1, 25 grand list. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I can answer that credibly until we've had time to do that is due this coming winter, because I don't know what that's gonna say in terms of higher categories. Could be further disambiguated, if they could be further disambiguated with consistency in a way to get at that question asked. I think if you called me back in 2 weeks to talk about that, I would say, hey, we've got this report that's due in December. Like, that's what I would want to really jump into the meeting because of that discussion.
Okay. But you would oppose it before that?
Why, I just don't know how it would be done. Like, I guess I would say why, if there's a report that's asking the question of how to do that. I think I would say, let's look at that before doing anything.
Think, trying to find a way to find out some of the property tax increase, which is probably the leading cause of this year unaffordable in the state, and I'm concerned that we're going to have more houses that people are going to use to tax sale in more second homes. And I would like to find a way to buy down more than the 2 cents that we're gonna have in the probably not probably this tax, the so any thoughts anyone could have on how we could help get that property tax down this year?
Everyone on this committee, I believe, shares with
Yes.
you, particularly daily and sometimes thrice daily.
Yes,
And
it's important.
so we don't need to,
Okay, I'm telling
you
you.
don't need to remind
I don't
us.
talk to the tax commissioners thrice daily.
The governor shares your concern.
I know he does, but he
And
hasn't told me how to fix it.
well, I think if I heard you before correctly, though, Madam Chair, I think you were saying you weren't necessarily saying that for fiscal year 25, they would be
I
taxed.
think you've told us, I think we know to change the brand, to do things now would be very difficult.
Yeah.
And would have some inconsistencies. Maybe more than it would a year from now. But I've got a present crisis, so I'm trying to find a way to just kind of. Yeah, I'm afraid we're gonna see more Vermonters driven out of their homes. I'm afraid we're gonna see more rent increases because property taxes are going up. And I think it's more than half of our people are paying 50% more of their income in housing costs. And the norm is 30. 36 if you put in taxes and insurance, the other personal costs. That's the rule of thumb. And we're not talking 50 and 56%. We got a lot of people that are there already. So I'm looking for solutions. If the governor has one, I'd love to hear it. This may be like. Senator Gray.
So the 30% you're talking about, is that like going to the bank? Threshold.
Yes.
Do we have data?
No, that's the housing, we have, where is Airmark? I just seen took over from Airmark. But they come in here every year and would present us with, this is the norm. This is the norm we use when we do renter, what do we call it now, not rebates. That is the economic norm, that's what people can afford to pay and cover their other bills, like their health insurance, which is going up, and food, which is going up. And if you figure in property taxes as an insurance, those things, at least if you're buying a house, you have to pay. It's at 36% is the max you should be spending on housing. And
Right, I mean, I'm just wondering, we do have a Vermont data that shows how much people are paying. We've done energy burden reports. I'm just curious.
Normally we comes up Earhart, but I think.
There's a website that VHFA manages called housingdata.org. It has all of this on there. For renters right now, 56% of the renters pay more than 30% of their income on rent.
And Chad Simmons, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and about a quarter pay more than 50%. So they're considered extremely rent burdened. So that's a huge amount.
And that is, and I think you'll find recent homeowners that are purchasing at highly inflated prices from 3 years ago. And highly inflated interest rates are getting up there. And we have a homelessness crisis and trying not to add to that.
So I think the question for the tax commissioner would be if there were any sales taxes that the governor would support, because that's the only thing that would buy down the education
That's the
rate
cloud.
in FY 25.
The cloud is a sales tax.
Are there other sales taxes that he would support?
You want to talk to you on that? I'm happy to.
No, so you have to get, bill is coming out today. Next week you can talk to your bill all week.
Happy to come.
But this is going, this bill,
Bring the
unless
sales
people are ready to stay here till 10 o'clock at night. And I don't really care, but it's cutting into your negotiation time and it has to go to a close. So I'm trying to move it along. We have been through this amendment. We have not been through the bill, so I'm not clear I'm clear what the taxes are doing. They are appropriating.
This has been proposed,
This has been proposed.
so we're clear of what our colleague has proposed to raise revenues.
We are
So-
clear, but there are other things in here that are not raising revenues. And we have not been through any of those sections, and I'm going to have Ted give us a fiscal estimate of what the taxes we are proposing, what the impact, because we're looking at the ed fund again, and
Well, that's switch that makes.
yeah,
But I want to make sure.
what am I doing?
It's this. Raising the money that we need to raise, that Senator Ram has offered us a way to raise it, is an issue. And we, instead of getting through that issue, we're off on the other issue of how do we bring down school, local education taxes for schools.
No, that is not what we do. We are looking at this tax proposal we've already added, which is the value fees and the other proposed tax issue in there. And we are getting a fiscal statement on that. We can get a fiscal statement. This is not necessarily money we have to raise. This is money that Senator Ron Kinsker would like us to raise.
Or we to raise that amount of money.
This
She
is-
hasn't proposed.
Yes, okay, but another committee has not said, we need this, unlike 3 weeks ago, where we need to raise money to balance the budget. So the NRB is probably the one that needs the most money. I was hoping we'd get a chance to look at their fee structure, which was suggested by appropriations. Senator Bray.
On the table that Pat put up, and it was, a line 7, then it was broken out. It went to general fund, and then underneath that, it went to a bunch of other things. One of those lines was 400,000 to the NRB. I think that was based on an earlier version of the bill from the House that had part-time positions. And in our committee, and in the report that probably they are full-time. So I'm thinking 400,000 can't buy 4 full-time.
No, and
So there's
my understanding
squaring up
is
there.
that money is an offset for the loss of revenue from the permits that we have removed from Act Two.
I think it's at board positions, on like the memo line or
Well,
something.
Senator Ron Hinsdale isn't here, so we can't ask what it, Sabani, do you know?
I was just gonna say 400 right now would be okay if we, for half a year.
Yeah,
But full year is gonna be closer to $1 million at full time with benefits.
great, okay, sorry.
So no one has raised that much.
Fiscal year.
Yeah.
We have put that requirement in the bill, but there is no ongoing funding source, and the PTT is
Sure.
not a
I
$20 million a year budget. source.
I was forgetting about half fiscal year.
Yeah.
So thank you both.
Okay. Right, thank you, Commissioner.
I'd be happy to share a little information about.
Okay, we'll have you come up. I'm gonna have Ted just give us his fiscal note, because we've dragged him in and out of here several times.
Correction for what I said earlier.
Yes.
Chad Simmons again, Vermont Housing Financing, just to correct what I said earlier, about 10% of Vermont households are extremely mortgage house burdens for the cost of housing who own their own homes. So a total of about 25% of Vermonters pay more than 30% of their income towards their home ownership costs, which includes property tax.
That other set of numbers was for renters.
That was for renters, correct? That's-
For the record, Tim Brennan, Joint Fiscal Office, we currently don't have a fiscal note for the amendment that would be
No, I
proposed.
think this was just what was in the bill, which are basically some property value increases.
Exactly, so I can speak specifically to the property tax freeze portion and specifically the proposal that would limit it to the flood designated areas. The initial proposal, which would have included properties in certain areas across the entire state, was $1 million as the governor recommended. With taking out those flood designated areas, or sorry, including only the flood designated areas, in fiscal year 25, that would still be an $810,000 cost to the education fund. It's because the designation was such a large piece of the state. You're still retaining a large part of the cost. Another part, an additional cost was the original proposal exempted properties in TIF districts, and this proposal would include TIF districts. So that part is a larger piece than the original proposal. So $810,000 in fiscal year 25, and because it's a 3-year freeze in fiscal year 26, it's 1.57 million because you're including the properties for the first year and exempting a new group of properties. And then in fiscal year 27, it's looking about 2.4 million. And then it would roughly stabilize at that level because it is a 3-year freeze. The folks who are frozen in the first year would lose their property tax exemption.
This is for the where this gets going, it's 2.4 million for as long as we continue.
Roughly, it increase as property values increase, but it would be roughly that amount.
Okay. So that's a $2.4 million hit.
Year three, right?
That is in year 3. In the first year, it's about
The first year is
810,000.
about 810,000.
If we were to go to the earlier construct, that constrained to flood restricted areas. What's the impact of that?
That was, so we're, $1 million.
For year one?
In year 1, and then 1.8 million in 26, and 3.8 in 27. The initial proposal also ramped it up for 5 years. So that
Oh,
would-
okay,
yes.
it's more because if we don't do it in flood damaged areas. This is limited to blighted housing or is it any housing?
It would be properties that are used as a principal residence in these designated areas.
Okay. But it could be a McMansion.
I would defer to folks
Yeah,
in
that's
the council.
it. You just told us what it costs.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the numbers. So if we do just like what, it's 810. 157, 1,000,057, it's 2,000,000.4, and it's 2,000,000.4. From then on out, I start to have questions. It's like weatherization. We've been weatherizing housing for at least 30 years that I've been involved in it. When are we finished? And I when it's got lighted housing, when is it finished?
So I don't know the answer to that good question, but I do know when we've been looking at putting up the pace on weatherization that our pace had been that just for the low income weatherization program. And 3 years ago, based on counts data, it suggested that and its current rate, we would have installed those homes until 2046.
All the low income.
Just low income is gonna take us to 2046, which is why we should try to double that rate.
Okay. Off the top, all right. Thank you. Do you have any more information than?
I think we'd probably wait until the final fiscal note is.
Okay.
If the proposed amendment adopted, then we would do a final fiscal note for that. I'm looking at Pat to see if there's any other things JFO would like to comment on at this piece, but.
I guess I'll just comment that the table I shared with you all would be sort of a fiscal summary of the underlying bill as it's come to you.
Yeah.
If you were to adopt the proposed amendment, so that is, you can kind of,
Okay.
and I'll send that to Zane so he can post it. That would be sort of a fiscal summary of where the bill would be at if you accepted the amendment.
Okay, committee.
The underlying bill spends $67 million. This amendment reduces that down to 5 million. Is that correct?
Essentially.
Is,
And I think
okay, I'm assuming though that everything other than what's in this amendment is accounted for in the budget. Do we know, I mean, how much money are we being asked to spend that isn't budgeted this year?
I know that there is some contingent, like on the contingent list are things like VHIP is on there, refugee
Yes.
housing is in the budget.
Farm worker housing, I thought was on there, isn't it?
So that is supposed to be coming from, if you remember the table, there was the additional allocation that was going to the trust fund. The presumption is that some of that money would and could be used for those projects.
Okay.
But rather than prescribing the use for them, it gives the HCP the flexibility to.
Well,
Yeah.
on your line of questioning, is the 67 million in the underlying bill in the budget?
Yeah.
No. Okay, so we can't stay, or it's not gonna.
So this, we're spending 12 million in here. But we've got 67 million in here. I assume if we're spending it and it's not in the budget, then we're going to have to raise it, or we are voting out expenditures for money we don't have.
Appropriations would probably just strike it out.
Sit on the wall.
That's right, it is going to approach. Okay, then we will let them have the fun of telling you. $67 million in housing. What do we, can we assume we will make the, we need to put an effective date in, I've heard from the tax commissioner. We need to strike the section on
Accessibility.
the accessibility. I'm assuming we're all agreed on that. And we probably need, well, the next question is, I think that's all we needed to take out. Did anybody else?
Can I get clarity on the effective date, because that would change the appropriation as I understand it.
Yes, I have a couple of things to ask about. One of them was effective dates. We, based on what I heard from the tax commissioner, I mean, the fact that so many of these sections are effective on passage were just placeholders because it's not been a topic of discussion at this point. We haven't changed those. So his point was that he would not be able to put these property transfer tax changes into effect that quickly. I mean,
Okay.
they have to change the forms, they have to
Yeah.
do things already.
So,
So my assumption would be a July 1 of this year effective date instead.
oh, that's when most things go in.
And we'll just double check that, is that what the revenue estimates were based off of?
That's when the fiscal year starts.
Okay,
So that's what we.
Yes, okay, that's what we've been looking and assuming all.
On the property transfer.
Yes.
okay, so. Effective,
B.
that's, I'm gonna need a motion to amend.
Differently.
We've got the
Yeah.
effective.
And
Primary homes.
my other question,
And. Let's see,
On that point,
we
man,
need to strike section 2911.
Places that have.
you know, on that point, may I ask a question, sure?
Yes,
So I get that we need that money for this fiscal year. Did the commissioner say that it's impossible for him to collect it on July
He
first?
said
I said impossible upon passage.
Okay.
July 1 is aggressive, not impossible. I would love clean definitions.
Okay,
my other question was relating to, the same, the transfer tax change. Commissioner mentioned residential is not defined, which is correct. So at this point, it would be up to the department to have to interpret that, and it's going to mean a plain language interpretation, and it would probably involve deer camps.
my
So if you would,
long instinct and political survival instincts tell me that taxing deer camps is a third rail. And I hesitate to step.
so you,
So we know we should put in either non-seasonal or year round. But I think probably seasonal.
that changes the fiscal.
Non-seasonal.
Yeah.
Don't tax.
Oh,
seasonal
that
or-
changes.
I'm sure it does, yeah.
So we're gonna tax deer camps,
Property transfer or on fair market value?
property transfer.
on the value at transfer, what's being paid.
What's being paid, which you assume is the market value. These days, yes, this is the
Seasonal,
market value.
Non-year round places would not be a second home. That's our.
No, if we do that, it changes the fiscal analysis.
Chad Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office, I could probably, again, these categories are all informational. I could provide an informational number on what shows up as seasonal on grand list categories in the property transfer tax data. I would just need to go back into my spreadsheet and do that.
Okay. How long will you need? I figure 5 minutes to walk over.
I would probably leave the room. I would give myself 45 minutes.
That will get us to 5:15. I think we're gonna be here that long. Before we go. Committee,
Madam Chair,
yes,
You asked me to get a written proposal.
Yes, okay, that's what we'll do. So you
You
can,
have it.
we will
I have
discuss,
access to it, I sent it to you and Zane.
okay, thank you. Princess, yeah.
Before we leave
Yes.
and go to something new, can I just double check understanding? So for instance, sections 90-91, that's $50 million. Are we sending it on for claims as is and then approach is gonna do their strip thing? Or are we saying there, that money's not there, we're not sending it?
The amendment takes care of the appropriations, so they fit in the transfer taxes. So we've reduced down all of the appropriation.
I think we're sending the appropriations to appropriations.
Okay, so.
But not the ones from the underlying bill.
Taxes right now.
Okay, like the middle income home ownership development program, it's 10 million. It's still in there at a reduced figure.
No.
I'm just asking, are we taking things out or are we?
Oh,
So that we're not sending something,
That's
or
it.
we're sending it and letting approach read it.
Why don't we start with where?
it should be in the amendment that it's struck.
Yeah, I think he's asking if we're sending the amendment as the underlying report. That's the way I take the question to be, or if we're actually making the changes to the appropriations. That's the way I understand the question. Because the appropriations, to your point about middle income, that doesn't appear in this, that's correct. The proposed amendment doesn't contain the middle income homeowners program appropriation. But the question is, which thing is going?
I'm sorry, I thought it struck the appropriations we couldn't pay for it in this.
Yep, it does. I think he's asking though, are we sending the report or are we sending the amendment with all of these appropriations for that, correct? Oh, just based on what Senator Cummings said and said, I'm gonna let finance deal with this. I'm sorry, I'm gonna let appropriations deal with this.
Yeah, if we choose to amend with this amendment, then we are saying that this is the appropriations we are choosing to do. I will let the folks, because I have no idea how many appropriations are inside this bill. And I don't feel qualified to decide whether or not they should be in this bill. I'm not feeling that comfortable with doing appropriations. So this is it. This is, okay. Now, I guess until we find out what taking out the deer case is going to do the fiscal notes. Because that, we need to have the effective date, we need to strike out.
We're saying deer camp, but you mean seasonals like
Seasonal.
lake camps that don't.
Basically, they don't have insulation or.
Which is its own category, so it would be nice if that rate goes down.
Is there any other way you'd like to modify residential or define residential? I'm partly asking because while testing, we could go and draft an amendment for you.
Okay, I think I'm gonna motion yet. We're gonna put in the July 1st effective date. We're going to strike this section, what I write here, 2911, the accessibility.
Right.
That VHFA asked for.
You got that?
And we were going to put the word seasonal, which seems to have an understood, if not a legal definition. Usually it means
I
a
think I
normal
would like
person
to.
wouldn't choose to live there year round because it doesn't have heat, it doesn't have indoor plumbing. Sometimes it has lake water and it freezes.
I think we want to define properties architecturally rather than terms of how we use. I think we need to define the properties that we're dealing with architecturally. For example, no insulation or no indoor plumbing. I deliver for the food show and there are people who live year round
Oh,
in places with no running water.
I said an average person would not choose to live there year round. I have no doubt that there are people living in houses, and there were from the day of the flood on without heat, without electricity, because it was the only place to go.
I think Ted's basing his fiscal note off of what is currently delineated in tax categorically as seasonal. So
All right, well, it's seasonals on the grand list at the town level. Tax, as I understand it, does not have a seasonal category.
I just wanna make sure you know where the fiscal
So,
number.
well, I mean, that's the practical, like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
how to identify them, I think legally.
Good.
Having a definition of seasonal or
Yeah.
non-seasonal.
Okay.
That could be defended by the department,
Yeah.
as opposed to the department trying to defend a decision based off of, well, this is what the lister said on the grand list. That to me is a little shaky.
Not considered habitable for year-round use.
So having something that,
It is,
at least defining it, yes, based on utility
yes, it
or
is
or
not
inflation.
habitable for year-round roof because it lacks
Which,
adequate is a judgment.
Habitable is defined.
And
is winterized defined?
you could have a house that's got 2 inches of insulation somewhere. It doesn't have,
We have statutory framework for suitable for habitability.
I like that, because you're right, seasonal, a ski resort could be insulated, if you live there all year long, but they might call it seasonal, and that they just use it in the winter.
well, that's who's using it.
It's important.
Habitable, it is not habitable all year round. I don't, if there is a definition of habitable.
Casey just said there is.
The habitability is in landlord tenant law everywhere, so
We have Title IX habitability. I'm
Yeah.
not sure that it's a
if you could start with
spelled
that.
out term, but yeah, we talk about habitability in Title
Yeah.
IX, so it's a
Well, we kind of
recognized
voted
thing.
out today, so we don't have time to start. We've got to end.
No, I know, I mean, I know habitability is a standard for rental properties. You
Yes.
cannot leave someone in uninhabitable.
So you have to have heat.
You have to running water.
Yeah,
yes,
the,
you have to
the way that I take this is if habitability is not a defined term in Title IX, we are comfortable in Title IX using the concept of habitability in the absence of definition. So if you've used habitability here, it is an understood term in Vermont law.
Okay.
That's the whole point.
Then that should do it. That is not habitable year round.
That's
Well, not
It's suitable for habitability.
That's where the homeless live.
Press the
Right.
I don't know
Houses
if
that
it
are
is,
not-
and I will check that, and then if it's
Well,
not, then I think we're still
that's-
safe.
If they, we have, no, they're not necessarily homeless people. I could show you a house within,
Yep,
I
I will
don't
look and
know
we.
how many yards of the state house that is not habitable and has been being inhabited since the day one of the flood. They're living in an upstairs bedroom without electricity, they didn't have heat,
Then they don't have to pay the double property tax.
but that's really kind of us. No, we have. You don't have to drive very far from the state house
You make a
to
change.
find
No.
housing that people are living in, not tents, not homeless.
I don't want them to pay for the second home tax.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Um,
well, I don't think these actually get bought and sold on the open. I think maybe they get deserted and re-inhabited.
I don't know if we settled on this or not. I asked to, remove the constraint in 76 Mark Douglas blocks 79 to 83. Decrees that being limited to just flood affected counties.
Yes.
And was that something the committee agreed to and?
We actually discussed adding Franklin and Addison.
Okay, I.
Because
that
they
feels
did-
A little conspicuous.
They did have flood damage, but they weren't in the disaster declarations.
Well, true. All right.
There were towns that did have flooding.
So
Yeah.
That was part of it.
that's only excluding 3 counties then.
Yeah. But you've gotta have,
You've been.
nobody
Here's what's gonna walk
in
right
on
in.
this committee, so they're out.
Well, it is a rational basis because of flood damage, but it did land in the definition that was generally used for who was caught in the flood.
But we know that there was in fact flood damage and
Yes.
there was in fact flooding, although in limited places within these counties.
That is going to change the fiscal note. So if we're gonna do that, we need to email Ted right now.
810 becomes 1.0, I think that's what he said.
I would just clarify on this particular tax that we're talking about. we actually need to receive some mapping data, which we're not gonna be able to turn on today.
Okay,
We don't need the fiscal note.
Okay. this will be one of the easier things to deal with in a committee of governance. We have the map, it's in the bill. We can refine the definition once we get maps and fiscal notes. Yes.
The commissioner also raised mixed use properties, and he and I have been conferred for a while. I leave it to the committee. But my feeling was that if any part of the property receives a landlord certificate or a homestead declaration, that it is exempt from paying the double property tax.
So some clarifications about that,
Yeah.
actually. For one thing, that as it's written right now, the second home provision, you know, does not reference a homestead declaration. It says to be used as a principal, or it will not be used as a principal residence, is what it says. And
Are you talking about the flooded area?
No, I'm talking about,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
talking about the transfer tax.
Yeah.
It does not, that, it's been discussed because the idea was that this could be something that could be checked with the homestead declaration. I just want to make that clarification because there, as the commissioner pointed out, I think what I'm saying is helpful to what you.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
But as the commissioner pointed out, like there are people who could file a homestead declaration and don't.
Right.
If it were written that way, then tax could be applied in a way which you're not intending, right? It's written,
It's used to
it's written as principal residence. It will not be used as a principal residence.
Mhm.
A proxy for checking for that would be homestead declaration, but that's not definitive. Because it could still be a principal residence even if it doesn't have a homestead declaration.
Okay.
It would just require the department to look into that part further, or maybe have the taxpayer
Okay.
provide some additional information. So I'm pointing that out to say that homestead declarations and the issues with that are not as much of a problem as you might think.
Cause the mixed use. I'm living upstairs over my store. I own the building. That's my principal residence.
Then my read of this is that the if it's used as a principal residence, then the 2.5% rate would not apply. Even if there's some other use taking place. I mean, there's more interpretation that would have to take place there. There might be a needed, I don't know, updating the regs for property transfer tax. But
Yeah, I rent out the third floor. I live on the second floor. There's a store on the first floor. That's my principal residence. Basically, it's coming down to the straight face test. Can I sit there at closing, look my lawyer, the bank's lawyer, the seller's lawyer, and the seller, or the seller in the face and say, I'm gonna use this as my principal residence? Lawyers have ethics codes. Bankers have ethics codes. They do. Not everyone abides by them.
so as long as it's the principal residence of the transferee. And for which the transferee will not be required to provide a landlord certificate. Then there's the 2.5% rate. So if the person's saying it will be their principal residence. Then this rate would not apply, even if it is a mixed use.
Am I getting the impression from this committee that once we do the amendments and we get a new fiscal report, that we are prepared to vote this amendment with the changes we've discussed, and then we are prepared to vote this bill out today? I am wondering if what happened yesterday when they were calling you at the bill? If we're going to,
She's waiting for us.
she's waiting for us, okay. Do
Upstairs.
we want,
Get the bill.
by leaving out seasonal residences? Or,
Not addressing.
no, we are, if you're buying a deer camp or a house that isn't insulated and doesn't have heat, and you have to bottled water because it doesn't have potable water, it pumps it out of the lake. What are we calling those now? See, they're seasonal words. we're exempting
We-
non-habitable residences.
we were
Year-round
going to use,
habitable
we were going to
based
use
on
the term
the
habitable.
renter's code as to what is habitable.
Habitable year round.
Yeah, I think we're just gonna say not habitable for year-round use is the idea
Okay.
here. Yes.
Okay,
And sorry, I wanted to confirm, because we didn't talk about this other piece that would be an amendment, the section 99 point that Commissioner Folio made.
Oh.
Just wanted to make,
introduce yourself and you can pull up a chair or you can bump Curly.
He's just, he's asking about the tax disclosure.
I just wanted to confirm that that's a part of the proposed amendment you guys want to vote on today. The section 99 piece that Commissioner Folio.
Landlords.
Changing the
Oh,
shall to a
the-
may.
the-
Yes,
okay, yes,
Okay.
okay. If. All right. We'll need to get this drafted. Are you drafting as we speak?
Would it be okay if we disappear for about 10 minutes?
I was gonna say, why don't we take a 15-minute break, come back here at 5 o'clock? I don't think anything Ted tells us at this point is the fiscal note is going to change anything. Because it doesn't seem to be causing a whole lot of angst at this point.
Just a quick question before, lawyers go, which is on habitability in Act 9, it excludes seasonal residences from the definition. So I don't know if you can borrow it anyway.
It will be fine. The habitability that's used in Title IX is just a concept. The section that you're talking about is whether there's an implied habitability from landlords to those.
Obligation.
So the exclusion for hunting camps is specific to that implied landlord piece. It is not about the concept of habitability, which we can use in this case. Yes, but that's
Sure,
helpful.
we weren't going into not standing land, or who knows?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I think we're saying.
Thank you. All right, committee, I think we should stand at ease, be back here before 5 o'clock. I really